Chapter 298. In Crepe Myrtle Palace, Li Mu hid behind a pillar, wishing he could tear Zhou Zhong's mouth apart. He still had his yang energy. Not only did he not feel ashamed, he even felt a little proud. If it weren't for the fact that his primordial yang was still there, how could this case be explained so quickly? But pride was one thing. Pride and making the case known to the whole world were two different things. That damned Zhou Zhong. He had been a bachelor for decades. What right did he have to criticize him? After Zhang Chun's incident, the order in the imperial court was a little chaotic. Many people knew that Li Mu was sent to the Ministry of Justice's prison yesterday and later came out. But they only knew the result, not the process. Some people even guessed that His Majesty had secretly instructed the Ministry of Justice. If that was the case, whether Li Mu had fallen out of favor would have to be re-evaluated. But then again, this case was really a disaster. No matter how many people hated Li Mu, they had to admit that he was as handsome as Cui Ming. He was the most handsome man in the divine capital. If he was willing, countless women would throw themselves at him and be his groom every night. But the truth was that such a person was just a virgin. Even the person who framed him must not have thought of this. Otherwise, he would not have framed Li Mu for rape. Today's morning court session ended quickly. To everyone's surprise, His Majesty did not say a word about Li Mu's being framed. This confirmed a conjecture. That person had really fallen out of favor. After the court, Li Mu went to Chengel Palace to seek an audience with the Empress. But he was still rejected, and he left the palace alone. All of this was seen by a palace made at the entrance of Chengel Palace. The officials in the palace, such as the palace secretary and the minister of the 3 provinces, also saw Li Mu's lonely figure leaving the palace. This news quickly spread to all the residences in the north and south courtyards. Zhu residence. Zhu Qi was lying on his bed. In the morning, his cultivation had been restricted, and he had been caned 10 times. He had just taken a medicinal pill to treat his injuries. When he heard the news, he immediately sat up in bed and gritted his teeth. Li Mu, just you wait. Then, a scream came from the room, followed by the sound of something heavy falling on the bed. Wu Manor. Although the old Taichung Temple deputy had supernatural powers and cultivation base, his cultivation base was limited when he used the cane. He endured 10 canes with his old bones. At this moment, he was also lying on the bed and asked, "Is what you said true?" A middle-aged man said, "It's absolutely true." He was framed, and the Empress didn't say anything. This time, he must have really fallen out of favor. Taichung Temple's deputy prime minister said gloomily, "When I recover in 2 days, it will be the time of Li Mu's death." Wei Estate. Wei Teng was limping around in the courtyard. He had taken some medicinal pills and used fulu. His injuries were much better now. When he heard about what had happened after the court was dismissed, he was overjoyed. This would be the last time he suffered a loss at the hands of Li Mu. As long as the emperor no longer protected him, with the power of the old party, Li Mu would be at their mercy. Ministry of Rights Assistant Minister's estate. A woman said hatefully, "I didn't succeed last time. This time, I'll make sure she dies without a complete corpse." The news that Li Mu had fallen out of favor caused quite a stir among the officials and nobles. In front of the Li Manor, Zhang Chun knocked on the door with a worried expression. This time, he was really panicking. Li Mu had been framed, but the emperor was indifferent. After the court was dismissed, he went to see the emperor but was rejected. The matter was much more serious than he had imagined. He didn't want to live in a big house with 5 entrances. He also didn't want to have a group of maids and servants. As a friend, he had to remind Li Mu to leave the divine capital as soon as possible. He had to get further and further away from here and never come back. As for himself, he had to consider resigning from his position. Zhang Chun knocked on the door of the courtyard. As soon as the door opened, he smelled a fragrance. It was the familiar fragrance of hot pot. Li Mu stood at the door and asked, "Why are you here, Zhang?" Zhang Chun was about to speak when he suddenly saw a figure beside the stove in the courtyard. It was a beautiful woman. She was putting a piece of tofu from the pot into a bowl. The moment he saw the woman's face, Zhang Chun's head buzzed. The news that Li Mu had fallen out of favor had spread like wildfire. Who would have thought that the Empress would refuse Li Mu's request to see her and eat hot pot with him in the Li Manor an hour later? No one would believe it if he told them about it. When he came back to his senses, he immediately looked at Li Mu and said, "It's nothing. I just came to tell you that we should have a meal together when you're free." Li Mu said, "We're eating. Do you want to come in and eat with us?" Zhang Chun quickly waved his hand and said, "I can't today. Maybe another day. My wife is waiting for me at home. Goodbye." He turned around and left. However, he did not return to his residence. Instead, he went to a broker in the Divine Capital and said to a broker, "Check if there are any empty courtyards in the Divine Capital. I won't consider those below the 5th rank. As long as they're above the 5th rank, Ministry of Justice." After the director of the Ministry of Justice reported to Zhou Zhong, he could not help but ask, "Sir, has Lord Li really fallen out of favor?" Zhou Zhong said calmly, "I'm afraid only His Majesty knows about this." The director shook his head and said, "What a pity." He then realized that he had misspoken. He looked up and was relieved when he saw that the assistant minister did not hear him. Zhou Zhong stood up and walked out of the Ministry of Justice. The director hurriedly chased after him and asked, "Where are you going, sir?" "I still have some things to report." Zhou Zhong waved his hand and said, "Let's talk about it tomorrow. I have an appointment with a friend today. We're going fishing outside the city." Ministry of Rights. An official walked into a government office and said to someone in the office, "Director Liu, the assistant minister is going to impeach Li Mu tomorrow. Should we follow him?" That person looked up at him and asked, "Why should we follow the assistant minister's impeachment?" The official said, "The assistant minister has this intention. You've just come to the Ministry of Rights, so you shouldn't curry favor with the assistant minister. After all, Li Mu has fallen out of favor. You don't have to worry about His Majesty blaming you for impeaching him. Perhaps His Majesty is waiting for someone to impeach him." That person waved his hand and said, "If you want to go, you go." "I'm not going." The director of the Ministry of Rights left helplessly. The Ministry of Rights originally only had one director. Later, for the imperial examinations, the imperial court added another one. However, this new director Liu did not seem to understand the ways of officialdom. Director Zhu was biased towards the old party. However, he did not dare to disobey the assistant minister. He had just come to the Ministry of Rights, but if he did not listen to the assistant minister, he would not have a good life in the future. After the director of the Ministry of Rights left, Director Liu curled his lips and said, "Impeach my ass. A bunch of idiots." Prince Shou's residence. Prince Shou liked to listen to operas. In addition to the stage built in the residence, there was also more than one opera troupe. Today, he seemed to be particularly interested. After listening to a few plays, he waved his hand at the performers on the stage and said, "I'm not listening to Prince Consort Chui today. King Lufizu fishing, for me, Zhou residence." During the meal in the Zhou residence, Zhou Xiong ate a few mouthfuls and put down his chopsticks. He looked at Zhou Jing and said, "Big brother, this time, Li Mu will not be able to escape this calamity. Should we call fourth brother out? If he sees this scene, he will be very happy. Will not be able to escape this calamity?" Zhou Jing looked at him and asked, "How so?" Zhou Xiong said, "Li Mu has already lost the emperor's favor. As far as I know, this time, whether it's our people or the old party, they all want to get rid of Li Mu completely. Fourth brother hates him to the bone. We have to let him see it with his own eyes." Zhou Jing put down his chopsticks and said, "Use your brain and think about it." With Wu Er's personality, even if it's not her close official, if any official in the imperial court was framed and slandered in such a despicable way, she will not do anything. Will she not let the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court investigate? Zhou Xiong was stunned and said in shock, "This?" Zhou Jing said, "How can I not understand my own daughter? If she wasn't really angry, she wouldn't have done this." The next morning court will probably be very lively. Zhou Xiong's expression changed and said, "What should we do?" The matter of framing Li Mu was obviously instigated by my sister-in-law. The director of the Ministry of Rights is in danger. We have to remind him that the imperial examination is imminent. Nothing can happen to him, it's too late. Zhou Jing said, "Last time, The Zhou family didn't do as she wanted. Now, she hates you and me to the bone. She won't even return to the Zhou family and won't listen to you. If she had succeeded in framing Li Mu last time, it would have been fine. But if she had failed, the director of the Ministry of Rights would have been lost. It's too late for you to remind her now. Zhou Xiong was stunned and muttered, "Could this be Li Mu's scheme again?" Zhou Jing didn't deny it and said, "I'm afraid that even his fall from grace last time was fake news released by him and Wu." Zhou Xiong said with a sullen face, "Her Majesty used to be so naive and pure. How did she become like this? She couldn't think of such a method. That Li Mu is as cunning as a fox. He must have taught Her Majesty the wrong things." He thought for a moment and asked, "Should we remind the others?" "No need." Zhou Jing shook his head and said, "If they can't even see through such a simple trick, they are useless. They should give up their positions as soon as possible and let someone capable take over Li residence." Li Mu put the fish and tofu that the Empress liked to eat into the pot and asked with concern, "How is Her Majesty's inner demon?" Zhou Yi picked up a piece of tofu and blew on it gently. She took a small bite and said, "It's all thanks to the chant you taught me. It's much better now." For some reason, ever since her inner demon first appeared, she would see Li Mu and it would throb uncontrollably. But after the morning court session, even without the chant, the inner demon didn't appear again. Perhaps it was because she imagined that Li Mu had been through hundreds of battles, which left such a shadow in her heart. But in reality, he was just like her, inexperienced. After realizing this fact, she felt much better. Li Mu was relieved when he heard this and picked up a piece of tofu for himself. According to the Empress's intentions, she would expose the director of the Ministry of Rights during today's morning court session, cripple his cultivation, and banish him. But Li Mu stopped her. Li Mu knew very well that the director of the Ministry of Rights and the mother behind him weren't the only ones who wanted his life. This time, he might as well take advantage of the situation and give them a collective surprise. So he proposed to join forces with the Empress and pretend that he had fallen out of favor. This would send a wrong signal to those who were ready to make a move. Finally, with the help of the case of the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights, they could catch them all in one fell swoop. After this incident, he believed that the remaining people would be much more obedient. The Empress agreed to Li Mu's plan without even thinking about it. The two of them had already put on the show and released the bait. Now, they were just waiting for the fish to take the bait. Crepe Myrtle Palace. Today's morning court session was held as scheduled. Since the end of the previous morning court session, many people in the court had been looking forward to today's session. The morning court session had just begun when another official stood up and said loudly, "Your Majesty, I have a memorial." The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue held up a memorial and said, "I would like to impeach the constable of the Luoyang Yamen, Li Mu. During his patrol, he often hung around the music hall and neglected his duties." As soon as he finished speaking, the director of the Ministry of Rights also stood up and said, "I would also like to impeach Li Mu. During his tenure, he accepted bribes from the people." The deputy director of the Taichung Temple also stood up and said, "I would like to impeach Li Mu. As the imperial censor of the palace, he used his position to suppress dissidents and abused his power. I would also like to impeach Li Mu. I would like to impeach Li Mu. I would like to." After the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, the director of the Ministry of Rights, and the deputy director of the Zongjing Temple stood up, a few more officials stood up one after another. The target of their impeachment was also Li Mu. Without a doubt, this was a premeditated impeachment. These officials had already discussed this matter before going to court. Among these people, there were officials from the old party and also officials from the new party. Among them, officials from the Ministry of Rights made up the most. However, after these people stood up, they looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. According to their guesses, there were countless people in the court who wished for Li Mu's death. However, at this moment, there were less than 10 people who stood up. This was far from the number they had expected. What were the other people in the court waiting for? Although the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights was also puzzled, there was indeed no one who stood up to impeach. According to the procedure, it was time for him to appear. He walked out with his ceremonial tablet and said, "Your Majesty, the imperial censor was originally a clear stream in the court. The imperial censor of the palace, Li Mu, has many controversial actions and is no longer suitable to be the imperial censor." He did not impeach Li Mu. He just took the opportunity to raise a request that sounded reasonable. The imperial censor was an honest official. With so many officials impeaching Li Mu, it meant that he was no longer suitable to be the imperial censor. Moreover, the reasons for their impeachment were not groundless. In the past 3 days, he had put in a lot of effort to impeach Li Mu. If Li Mu was not the imperial censor, he was just a lowly constable in the divine capital. A lowly constable could be easily transferred out of the divine capital for any reason. By then, they would have the final say on how Li Mu would die. After the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights finished speaking, the court was very quiet. The important officials in front of him did not agree or disagree. Most of the other officials were also quiet. At this moment, the Empress's voice came from behind the curtains. "You want to impeach Li Mu?" The assistant director of the Ministry of Rights walked forward and said, "Your Majesty, we want Li Mu." At this moment, nearly 10 officials behind him, including the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights, were stunned. Li Mu? Hadn't Li Mu fallen out of favor? Why was the Empress still addressing him so intimately? They dared to impeach Li Mu because Li Mu had fallen out of favor. If Li Mu had not fallen out of favor, then they looked at each other, their hearts sinking into a bottomless abyss. Oh no, they had fallen into a trap. Chapter 299. The Empress's words of Minister Li caused the noisy court to fall into a temporary silence. Her Majesty rarely said the words, "beloved minister." She only addressed the ministers in the imperial court as ministers. How could she address a minister who had fallen out of favor as beloved minister? The only possibility was that Li Mu's falling out of favor was just an illusion. Other than those who stood out to impeach Li Mu, most of the officials in the court showed a look of understanding. Today's scene was within their expectations. This was a trap set up by the Empress and Li Mu together. His Majesty and Li Mu teamed up to act as bait in order to lure these people out, and they really took the bait. At this moment, Zhang Chun cleared his throat and stood out. He said, "Your Majesty, I have something to say." Mr. Mei looked at him and asked, "What do you have to say, Lord Zhang?" Zhang Chun pointed at the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue and said, "Lord Wei said that Constable Li spent time in the music hall during his patrol and neglected his duties. Then I would like to ask, in the case of Xianxia, who was not afraid of the Academy's pressure. As a constable, Constable Li patrolling brothels, music halls, and restaurants is his duty. If it were not for the outlaws of Luoyang who often bullied the weak and humiliated the musicians, would Constable Li frequent these places?" Wei Ting opened his mouth and was speechless. He knew that Zhang Chun was not entirely right, but at this moment, it was not important. The Empress, Minister Li, just now made him completely panic. As long as Li Mu did not fall out of favor, no matter what they did, it would be in vain. At this moment, Zhang Chun pointed at the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Rights and said, "You said that Li Mu accepted bribes when he was on duty. As everyone knows, Constable Li is not afraid of power and wholeheartedly serves the people. He has brought justice for many innocent people in Luoyang. The people respect him and love him. When he was patrolling the streets, they understood his hard work and served him tea to quench his thirst and a bowl of noodles to allay his hunger. This is the people's kindness to him. You call this accepting bribes?" He snorted and looked around at the people in the court. He said, "If this is called accepting bribes, then I hope that all of my colleagues in the court today can make the people willingly accept bribes. Touch your conscience. Can you?" The Minister-Counselor opened his mouth but could not refute. He knew what Zhang Chun said better than anyone else, but so what? His Majesty doted on Li Mu, so the people gave him these gifts to show their love and respect for him. Li Mu had lost the favor of the emperor, and the commoners had given him these gifts. He had accepted bribes. This was the court. They guessed that Li Mu had lost the emperor's favor. That was why they dared to stand up today and use this as a reason to impeach Li Mu. But judging from the situation in front of them, they seemed to have guessed wrong. One wrong step and the whole game was lost. In the end, Zhang Chun pointed at the senior minister of Taichung Temple and said, "You said that His Excellency Li took advantage of his position to attack dissidents. What is dissident and what is self? His Excellency Li has a noble character and has never formed cliques for personal gain. On the contrary, you all consider yourselves as the new and old cliques. The crime of disrespect in front of the palace was set by the late emperor. His Excellency Li respected the late emperor and carried out the law set by the late emperor, so he punished you. How dare you?" The minister Taichung Temple's face turned red. "You are slandering me." Many people in the court looked at Zhang Chun with disdain. There were indeed people in the court who respected the late emperor, but Li Mu was definitely not one of them. Li Mu's passion in the past few months was to overthrow the late emperor's old system. Who in the court did not know that? Zhang Chun, Li Mu's dog, was really shameless to protect his master. But no matter what, his words were watertight and no one could refute. Moreover, the situation in the court was not clear yet. No one was willing to stand up and refute. Whether Li Mu was guilty or not depended on whether the empress was willing to protect him. If the empress was willing to protect him, he would be innocent even if he was guilty. If the empress was not willing to protect him, he would be guilty even if he was innocent. At this time, the empress's voice came from behind the curtain again. A few days ago, Minister Li was maliciously framed. Did the Ministry of Justice find out who was behind it? Everyone in the court was shocked when they heard this. This happened in the last morning court. The empress did not say anything about it last time. But today, she suddenly mentioned it. The meaning behind it was self-evident. The assistant minister of Rights's eyelids twitched. He could not help but lower his head. Zhou Zhong stood up and said, "Your Majesty, the culprit disguised himself as Lord Li and committed the crime. After that, he disappeared. The Ministry of Justice has not found any clues. If we wait for the Ministry of Justice to find clues, how long will Minister Li be wronged?" The Empress looked at him and said coldly, "Mei Wei, bring him here." Mr. Mei looked outside the hall and said, "Bring him here." Two women escorted a middle-aged man into the hall. When he saw the middle-aged man, the Assistant Minister of Rights finally could not control his expression. After the deed was done, he had ordered this person to leave Luoyang and never come back. He did not expect to see him in the court. Mr. Mei looked coldly at the middle-aged man and said, "Speak. Who ordered you to frame Lord Li?" When he said this, the officials were shocked again. They did not expect the Empress to have already captured the culprit. This person used fulu or pills to disguise himself as Li Mu. Even the Ministry of Justice would not be able to find him. The internal guards would not be able to find him. The Empress must have done it herself. The power of a transcendent powerhouse was beyond their imagination. Of course, more importantly, the Empress had done it herself for Li Mu. This was enough to prove one thing. The middle-aged man knelt on the ground and pointed at the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights. He said, "It was Lord Qin. It was Lord Qin who gave me the fake form pill and told me to pretend to be Lord Li and rape that woman to frame him. Nonsense." The Assistant Minister of Rights' face was pale. He pointed at him with a trembling finger and said, "I have no grudge against you. Why did you frame me?" The middle-aged man shook his head helplessly and said, "Lord Qin, it's useless. They all know." "Just admit it," the Assistant Minister of Rights said sternly. "What nonsense are you talking about? I don't even know you." Although his voice was not soft, everyone present could hear the trembling in his voice. Clearly, he was not confident. They all realized something. They did not expect the Assistant Minister of Rights to be the one who would frame Li Mu like this. When they thought about it more carefully, the Assistant Minister of Rights' wife was Zhou Chu's sister. Zhou Chu had died at Li Mu's hands. He had enough motive to frame Li Mu. The middle-aged man waved his hand and images appeared in front of everyone's eyes. In the image, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights handed a pill to the middle-aged man and seemed to whisper a few words into his ear. If this middle-aged man was the adulterer who framed Li Mu, then it went without saying who the real mastermind behind this was. Seeing these images, the Assistant Minister of Rights trembled and fell to the ground powerlessly. At this moment, no explanation would be of any use. With witnesses and evidence present, they could perform a soul search on him. At that time, no matter what secrets he had in his heart, he would not be able to hide them. In the end, this matter was still due to his negligence. His negligence was that he did not kill this person and completely destroy the evidence after the deed was done. His negligence was that he was too anxious and believed the Dowager Consort's words. He thought that Li Mu had fallen out of favor with his wife, which was why he dared to act so recklessly. Now that things had come to this, there was no use regretting it. He hung his head and sat on the ground, not saying a word. Clearly, he had accepted his fate. The Assistant Minister of Rights' actions had completely confirmed his crimes. He was even spared from unnecessary interrogation. At this moment, the Crepe Myrtle Palace was completely silent. Everyone's hearts were extremely heavy because the entire palace was enveloped by a powerful aura. This aura came from the curtain in front of them. Under this aura, even the 5th and 6th level courtiers felt as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them. It was obvious that Her Majesty was extremely angry. First, you secretly framed him. Then, you joined forces with the imperial court to impeach him. You said that Minister Li was suppressing his dissidents. Who exactly was the one doing so? Hiring a murderer to frame a colleague. The Assistant Minister of Rights will be removed from his position and sent to the border counties. The Ministry of Justice will investigate this case strictly. Do not leave out anyone who participated in this case. The Assistant Minister of Rights, the Assistant Minister of Revenue, the Minister of Taichung Temple, and the others formed a clique for personal gain and attacked dissidents. They will be removed from their positions immediately and will never be employed again. All those related to this case will be severely punished. In the imperial court, the Empress was furious. She dismissed all the officials who had impeached Li Mu today. Ever since she ascended the throne, the courtiers had never seen her so angry. The Assistant Minister of Rights and the others were just ordinary impeachments. Even if the reason for the impeachment was wrong, the consequences would not be so severe. Impeachment was an impeachment based on hearsay. Afterward, there would naturally be internal guards or imperial censors to verify the truth. Every official in the imperial court had the power to impeach. However, they had chosen the wrong time. The Assistant Minister of Rights had hired a murderer to frame a colleague in the imperial court. This was something that the imperial court could not tolerate. There were disagreements and conflicts between courtiers. This was normal. However, there must be a bottom line in any conflict. The Assistant Minister of Rights' actions had crossed the bottom line of the imperial court and the bottom line of the law. The Assistant Minister of Rights, the Assistant Minister of Revenue, and the others happened to be implicated by him. What should have been a normal impeachment became a conspiracy. In the end, not only did they lose their official positions, but they also had to face prosecution. This was obviously a test by Her Majesty. While testing the courtiers, she also caught all the courtiers who were tempted to take action against Li Mu in one fell swoop. She was using this method to protect her favored courtiers. She was also using the fate of these people as a warning to others. After today, everyone would know that Li Mu was the Empress's man. If they tried to slander or frame him through clumsy means, they would eventually pay with their lives. Chapter 300. The Minister of Rights, the Minister of Revenue, the Minister of Taichung Temple, and the others stood in the main hall. The Empress's voice was still echoing in their ears. It was not easy for them to enter the 4 great academies. After leaving the academies, they had to wait for a long time before they could fill a vacancy. They had also worked hard in the bureaucracy for many years before they could reach their current positions. Decades of hard work had turned into bubbles in a single day. They should have known that Li Mu was as cunning as a fox. How could he suddenly fall out of favor? This was all a trap set by him. There were so many officials in the court, but only a few of them took the bait. After the morning assembly, the Minister of Rights was taken away by the Ministry of Justice. No one knew how many people were involved behind him. The other 9 officials were also demoted, especially the Ministry of Rights. Under the Minister of Rights, half of the important officials were gone. The imperial examination was imminent, and the court had to fill the vacancy in the Ministry of Rights. The imperial examination could not be delayed. As usual, this matter was nominated by the Hall of Secretaries. The position of Minister of Rights was very important. It needed an experienced official. However, there were not many rank 4 officials in the court. Every one of them held an important position. It was not possible to transfer officials of the same rank to the Ministry of Rights. If they were transferred back and forth, there would be a vacancy that could not be filled. It would cause chaos in the other departments. After thinking about it, Lu Yi came to the Ministry of Rights to seek the opinion of the Minister of Rights. The Minister of Rights was also worried about this matter. The imperial examination was imminent, and the Ministry of Rights did not have enough manpower. After this incident, more than half of the officials in the Ministry of Rights were gone. Even the Minister of Rights was dismissed. He urgently needed an assistant. He thought about it but could not think of a suitable candidate. In the end he said, "Why don't we let Minister Lu take over?" Although he has not been in the Ministry of Rights for long, he is familiar with the affairs of the ministry. He can take on this responsibility. Lu Yi had some impression of Minister Lu. He said, "Minister Lu has just been transferred and he is going to be the Minister of Rights. Isn't this promotion speed a bit too fast?" If he had someone he could use, the Minister of Rights wouldn't be forced to do something beyond his ability. He shook his head and said, "Dr. Lu was transferred here on a regular basis. It can't be considered a promotion. His experience is not shallow. Although he is still somewhat lacking as an assistant minister, there is no other way at the moment. The imperial examinations are important. If it is delayed, none of us can bear the responsibility." According to Great Zhou's usual practice, the officials of the various ministries were rarely transferred outside. The position of assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights was usually taken over by a doctor. However, the doctor often had to work hard for 10 years or even longer before he could become an assistant minister. This Dr. Lu had just been transferred not long ago, but he had already made an exception and was promoted. This was very rare in the officialdom. But who asked the former assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights to seek his own death? Of all the people he could have touched, he just had to touch Li Mu. This move was not a big deal, and Li Mu did not suffer any losses. More than half of the Ministry of Rights was lost by him. If the vacancy in the Ministry of Rights was not resolved as soon as possible, the imperial examinations would definitely be affected. After thinking for a long time, Lu Yi nodded and said, "Since the minister recommends Dr. Lu, the Secretariat will nominate him Ministry of Justice." Inside the prison of the Ministry of Justice, the Assistant Minister of Rights, who had been in high spirits during the morning court session, was now a prisoner. He sat dejectedly in a corner with a lonely expression. Zhou Zhong walked to the door of the prison and said, "Open the door." The jailer hurriedly opened the door, and Zhou Zhong slowly walked in. He walked in front of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights and said, "His Majesty has ordered that the people involved in this case be severely punished. Lord Qin and that Li Mu have no enmity. Who is behind this?" The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights said, "Zhou Zhong is my wife's younger brother. He died because of Li Mu. I just want to avenge him. There is no one behind this." Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "You are the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights. You have a high position. After the imperial examinations were reformed, you have even more power. Zhou Zhong is your wife's younger brother, not your biological brother. You have no reason to do this." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights said, "I am responsible for what I did. Don't waste your breath." Zhou Zhong smiled and said, "Actually, even if you don't say it, I know. On the day Li Mu was imprisoned, your wife and mother-in-law came to the Ministry of Justice. If there is anyone in Chengdu who hates Li Mu the most, it would be your mother-in-law. Her son died at the hands of Li Mu. It is reasonable that she wants to kill Li Mu for revenge." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights looked at him and said, "Lord Zhou, you should know better than me that some things require evidence. Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, I know what you are waiting for. You are waiting for the Zhou family to protect you. However, have you ever thought about why no one from the new party stood up for you in the imperial court today? The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights' expression froze. This was something he could not understand even now. Zhou Zhong continued, they already knew that this was Her Majesty and Li Mu's scheme, but they did not tell you. It is obvious that they have given up on you. You hired assassins to frame your colleagues and touched Her Majesty's bottom line. The Zhou family cannot protect you, and they have no way to do so. Regardless of whether you give them up or not, you will be sent to the battlefield at the border. With your cultivation, you will become a dead soul at the hands of those demon kings and ghost kings in less than a month. No, they will devour your body and soul. They will not give you the chance to become a dead soul. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights thought carefully and his face gradually paled. Zhou Zhong looked at him and said, when the late emperor was still alive, Her Majesty was already chosen as the crown prince's wife. At that time, the Zhou family's goal of stealing the country had not been exposed. The late emperor treated the Zhou family very well and gave them 2 death exemption tokens. Now that you have been sentenced to exile, it is no different from a death sentence. If the Zhou family is willing to save you, although they cannot restore your position, they can let you stay in the divine capital and keep your life. If the Zhou family is not willing to save you, then you can only wait for death. Zhou Zhong looked at him one last time and turned to leave. 15 minutes later, a woman came to visit him in the prison. When the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights saw the woman, he immediately got up and ran to the door of the prison. He shouted, "Wife, wife, save me." The woman's expression was ugly. She asked, "How did this get exposed?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights said, "It must be Her Majesty's divination. Li Mu's fall from grace was fake. We were all fooled by them." The woman gritted her teeth and said, "We are her family. She actually treated us like this for an outsider." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights quickly said, "It's too late to say this now. Wife, you have to think of a way to save me. I heard that the Zhou family has 2 death exemption tokens. As long as I have one, I won't be exiled to the border counties." The woman nodded and said, "I will go and beg father. Wait for me here." Zhou Manor. Zhou Ting had just finished his seclusion. When he heard about the recent events, he was furious. "Stupid." The woman who had returned to the Zhou family said with a cold face, "Stupid or smart, I have to avenge Chu. He is a piece of flesh that fell from my body. I will not let him die in vain." Zhou Ting said with a sullen face, "Because of your stupidity, we lost an assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. Do you know how important that position is?" The woman said coldly, "I don't know and I don't want to know. I only know that I have to avenge Chu." Zhou Qian looked at her father and said, "Father, you have to save my husband. If he is exiled to the border counties, what will happen to me? What will happen to our child?" Zhou Ting said indifferently, "This matter is already known by the entire court. His Majesty has personally issued a decree. How can I save him?" Zhou Qian said, "Doesn't our family have a death exemption token? As long as we use the death exemption token, we can exempt him from the crime of being exiled, right?" Zhou Ting glanced at her and asked, "Who told you that?" Zhou Qian did not answer directly. She said, "Father, I beg you, save my husband." Zhou Ting was expressionless. The Zhou family did have a death exemption token, and there were 2 of them. They were both bestowed by the previous emperor. The Zhou family had seized the emperor's aura and destroyed the continuation of the Shao royal family. If they were to use their death exemption token, it would probably enrage the old faction of the Shao royal family. Moreover, the minister of the Ministry of Rights was already a useless person. There was no need to waste a token to save him. Even if he agreed, his eldest brother and the rest would not. Zhou Ting said, "The Zhou family does not have a death exemption token. We cannot save him." Zhou Qian complained tearfully, "Father, are you so heartless? Are you going to watch your daughter lose her husband and your grandson lose his father?" Zhou Ting thought for a moment. He looked at her and said, "There are many talents in the fairies' capital. After separating from him, I will choose another young talent for you. No matter what, he will be several times stronger than him." Zhou Qian looked at her father. Her crying gradually stopped. An hour later, in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Qian stood outside the cell and said to the Minister of the Ministry of Rights, "I have asked. The Zhou family does not have a death exemption token. Father cannot save you. Don't worry. After you go to the border counties, I will take good care of the child. Do not involve more people in this matter." Zhou Qian did not stay for long. She left in a hurry. The Minister of the Ministry of Rights leaned against the cell door and slid down weakly. After an unknown period of time, a sigh came from behind him. He turned his head and looked at Zhou Zhong, who was standing in the shadows. He asked, "What are you sighing about?" Zhou Zhong looked at him and said slowly, "I feel bad for you. You are doing well as the Minister of the Ministry of Rights. You have no enmity with Li Mu. But because of someone else, you got into trouble. Your efforts in the first half of your life have been wasted. You do not have long to live. And the person who caused you to fall to this state is not even willing to save you. I believe you know very well that the Zhou family has a death exemption token. It is just that they are not willing to save you." The Minister of the Ministry of Rights looked at him with a cold smile and said, "Don't you want me to give up more people? I am afraid you will be disappointed. This matter was done by me alone. It has nothing to do with anyone else." Zhou Zhong looked at him and said with a faint smile, "Have you ever thought about what you will be like after you die?" He looked at the Minister of the Ministry of Rights. His eyes were like deep pools. His voice carried a strange power as he slowly said, "Your wife, although no longer young, is still in the prime of her life. After you die, she will still have a long life. She will definitely remarry. At that time, she will take in an even younger and more handsome husband than you. In the future, they will have their own children. That person will live in your mansion, sleep with your woman, and if he is not happy, he might even beat up your children." Zhou Zhong looked into his eyes. His gaze was deep as he said slowly, "They treated you like this. Is it worth it for you to protect them like this?" Zhou Zhong's voice seemed to have a magical power. When the Minister of the Ministry of Rights heard this, a trace of confusion appeared on his face. Then his chest began to rise and fall slightly. His breathing became rapid, the veins on his forehead bulged, and his eyes became bloodshot. "I didn't want to interfere, but that old woman forced me to do so. That false form elixir was given to me by her, but she didn't save me. What right does she have to not save me? Since she doesn't want me to live, then let her die with me." Translator's note: Lu_Kaixin translator, Kaixin editor, Valvrave 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 editor, Valvrave. Chapter 301. Ministry of Justice. When Zhou Zhong walked out of the prison, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, who was waiting outside, whispered into his ear, "Lord Qin from the Ministry of Personnel is here." The Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Justice were the pillars of the old party in the imperial court. Zhou Zhong walked into the yamen and saw a figure standing there. He asked, "Lord Qin, are you here for something important?" The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel turned around and looked at Zhou Zhong. He asked, "The higher-ups say that the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights must be punished severely. This is a big blow to the Zhou family and the new party. We can't let go of this opportunity." Zhou Zhong said calmly, "Just the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights is not enough." The Assistant Minister's eyes flashed. He asked, "Lord Zhou, you mean?" Zhou Zhong said, "The source of this matter is Zhou Ting's wife, not the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights. If we can drag her down, the Zhou family will protect her for the sake of their reputation or for other reasons. My goal is the Zhou family's 2 death exemption medallions. Without them, it will be much easier for us to fight the Zhou family in the future." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel nodded. The late Emperor's death exemption medallions were actually given to a thief who stole the country. It is indeed a disgrace to us. It would be best if we can make them use the medallions. However, I don't think the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights will rat out his mother-in-law. The Zhou family will not use the medallions for a mere assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. Zhou Zhong looked at him and asked, "Does Lord Chen not believe me?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel was stunned. He asked, "Could it be?" Zhou Zhong said, "The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights has already confessed that it was his mother-in-law, Zhou Ting's wife, who instigated him to frame Li Mu. She is the mastermind behind the scenes. This time I will make the Zhou family pay the price." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel was shocked. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights actually ratted her out. Then he came to his senses and praised, "Lord Zhou is always full of surprises. If we can make the Zhou family hand over the 2 death exemption medallions, Lord Zhou will have done a great service." Zhou Zhong said calmly, "This is what I should do in order to support the legal wife." An uninvited guest arrived at the entrance of Zhou residence. The assistant minister of justice, Zhou Zhong, also had the surname Zhou, but he was different from the Zhou family. When he was in the imperial court, he sided with the old party. Over the years, the officials of the new party had suffered many losses in his hands. Zhou Zhong came to the Zhou clan alone. Even though there were no officials from the Ministry of Justice following him, the first Missy's husband was still in the Ministry of Justice's prison. Nothing good could come from Zhou Zhong's visit to the Zhou clan at this moment. Even so, the Zhou clan's gatekeeper did not dare to slight him. After inviting him into the Zhou clan's residence, he went to report it as quickly as possible. Zhou Zhong sat in the front hall, sipping his tea. After a while, someone stepped into the hall. Censor Zhou Xiong walked to the main seat and sat down. Only then did he look at Zhou Zhong and ask, "Assistant Minister Zhou, what business do you have with my Zhou residence?" Zhou Zhong put down his teacup and said, "I'm here on official business, so I won't beat around the bush." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights hired assassins to frame an important official of the court. Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Zhou Xiong. "The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights has committed a serious crime. The Ministry of Justice will punish him accordingly. The Zhou clan will abide by the law and will not interfere." Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "That's good. In that case, I'll have to trouble Censor Zhou to invite Madame Zhou out so that I can bring her back to the Ministry of Justice for interrogation." Zhou Xiong's expression changed when he heard this. He forced himself to calm down and glared at Zhou Zhong. He asked, "What does the case of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights have to do with Madame Zhou? She's the wife of the court. How can you interrogate her just because you want to?" Zhou Zhong's expression was calm as he said slowly, "His Majesty has decreed that the Ministry of Justice will handle the case of Lord Li being framed. Anyone involved in the case, regardless of identity or status, will be punished severely. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights has already confessed that Madame Zhou is the mastermind behind the case of Lord Li. If the Zhou clan does not hand her over, it will be considered as defying the decree. Is the Zhou clan going to defy the decree?" The veins on Zhou Xiong's forehead throbbed. He quickly regained his composure and said, "Assistant Minister, please don't cross the line." Zhou Zhong said calmly, "If I didn't cross the line, the person who came to the Zhou residence today would be the constable of the Ministry of Justice." Zhou Zhong's words were very clear. As the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, he did not have to arrest criminals personally. However, he had shown enough respect to the Zhou clan by coming here alone. If the Zhou clan still insisted on being stubborn, they would be asking for it. This also meant that the Ministry of Justice was determined to take Madame Zhou. There was no room for negotiation. Even though Zhou Xiong wanted to kill the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights, he had to admit that this matter had blown up. After he calmed down, he looked at Zhou Zhong and said, "Sir Zhou, please go back first. I'll personally go to the Ministry of Justice to deal with this matter in 2 hours." Zhou Zhong stood up and said, "I'll be waiting at the Ministry of Justice." A moment later, in a courtyard of the Zhou residence, a woman grabbed her messy hair and gritted her teeth as she yelled, "Bastard, bastard! I didn't agree to Qianxian marrying him back then, but you insisted. Do you see his face now?" Zhou Ting slapped her face and said angrily, "Shut up. If it wasn't for you, things wouldn't have turned out this way." The woman covered her face. After being stunned for a moment, she completely exploded. She grabbed Zhou Ting's neck and said crazily, "How dare you hit me? How dare you hit me?" Zhou Ting knocked her out with a slap and ordered the maids in the courtyard, "Take Madam back to her room to rest. Without my orders, don't let her out of her room." The two maids helped the woman back to her room. Zhou Xiong looked at Zhou Ting and asked, "Fourth brother, about this?" Zhou Ting closed his eyes and said, "Go and ask Big Brother. No matter what Big Brother decides, I'll agree." Zhou Xiong walked out of the courtyard and crushed a jade talisman. Soon, a figure suddenly appeared in the courtyard. It was the minister, Zhou Jing. Zhou Xiong walked forward and said, "Big Brother, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights at the Ministry of Justice sold out sister-in-law. Earlier, Zhou Zhong came to the residence to ask for her. I told him to go back and wait. How should we deal with this matter?" Zhou Jing's eyelids drooped slightly. He said, "As expected, the old party won't let go of this opportunity." Zhou Xiong sighed and said, "We have to answer to the Ministry of Justice. We can't really hand sister-in-law over." Zhou Jing said, "I'm afraid they don't want her." Zhou Xiong was stunned for a moment. He quickly reacted and asked, "Big Brother, are you saying that their goal is the Zhou family's death exemption medallion?" Zhou Jing extended his hand. There was a flash of golden light and two medallions appeared. He handed the medallions to Zhou Xiong and said, "Send these two medallions to the Ministry of Justice." Zhou Xiong took the medallions and said doubtfully, "Two?" Zhou Jing said, "Either send them two or none. Sister-in-law is a member of the Zhou family. Isn't Qian Er's husband one too?" The death exemption medallion was too important. Zhou Xiong was reluctant to part with it and did not understand. After Zhou Jing's reminder, he quickly understood the matter. They could either save both of them or not save both of them. The Zhou family only had these two choices. As for saving one and giving up the other, as one of the 9 families of the Great Zhou, the Zhou family would be ridiculed if they did such a thing. The Zhou family could not afford to lose face. To them, they could lose benefits, but they could not afford to lose face. He kept the medallion inside. He left the Zhou family and headed to the Ministry of Justice. A moment later, at the Ministry of Justice's assistant minister's office, Zhou Xiong slammed a medallion on the table and asked Zhou Zhong, "The death exemption medallion is here. Can I take the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights away?" Zhou Zhong picked up the medallion and looked at it. He said, "The late emperor gave you the death exemption medallion. It can even exempt you from the death penalty. Men, take Lord Zhou to the prison and release the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights." Zhou Xiong turned to leave. Zhou Zhong said, "Wait." Zhou Xiong's eyelids twitched. He asked, "Is there anything else?" Zhou Zhong said, "The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights can be exonerated. However, in this case, Madame Zhou is the mastermind. If the Zhou family does not send her to the Ministry of Justice by today, I will send someone to take her away." Smith. Zhou Xiong took out another death exemption medallion and slammed it on the table. He said, "Is this okay now?" Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "Please go ahead." Zhou Xiong snorted and turned to leave. Not long after, he walked out of the Ministry of Justice with the former assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. He looked at him angrily and said, "Remember, the Zhou family wasted a death exemption medallion for you. Treat Xianxian better in the future. Don't be ungrateful." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights nodded. Zhou Xiong, who had already turned around, did not notice that there was no gratitude in his eyes. There was only hatred. This matter had nothing to do with him, but in the end he was implicated and almost lost his life. First, the Zhou family gave up on him. Now they made such a face. Who were they trying to impress? Ministry of Justice. In the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong flipped open a book on the table. He flipped to a certain page, picked up a pen, and gently crossed off the 2 Zhou family on the list. Then he closed the book and said slowly, "There are 7 more." Li Mu walked on the streets. The people of Fairy's capital greeted him warmly. Hello, Constable Li. Constable Li, you're still single. My daughter is also of age. Constable Li, do you want to consider my daughter? Constable Li, I have 2 daughters. One is prettier than the other. Constable Li, don't go. Li Mu could not resist the people's enthusiasm. He did not even bother to collect his telekinesis and fled. The case was cleared. It was very thorough. The people even knew the details of the case. Now, all the people of Fairy's capital knew that he was a virgin. Along the way, there were countless people who wanted to marry their daughters to Li Mu. Although Li Mu usually got along well with them, he did not have any thoughts about their daughters. It was all Zhou Zhong's fault. Because of this, he became famous in Fairy's capital again. Sooner or later, Li Mu would find him and settle the score. When he finally reached his house, he saw a few carriages parked at the entrance. Beside the carriages, Mr. Mei was instructing a few people to move the things inside. Li Mu walked over and asked, "What's all this for?" Lord Mei smiled and said, "This is His Majesty's reward to you. There are precious fabrics, rare flowers, and some rare items that were offered as tributes from various places. Later, His Majesty will have people rearrange the array formation in your residence." The carriages were parked in a row outside Li Mu's residence. If not for Mr. Mei's explanation, Li Mu would have thought that the Empress was moving into his house. He really didn't expect that Li Si would be right about this. Li Si said that the Empress would warm up to him again after a short period of coldness. Looking at the boxes of rewards, Li Mu even suspected that the Empress was trying to flirt with him. Li Mu did not know whether she had met her inner demons or not, but it was true that she was inexplicably cold and hot to him. Li Si had said that this was a routine between men and women. Only by being both hot and cold, and being neither friendly nor distant could they arouse the other party's nervousness and sense of danger. Now that Li Mu thought about it, during that period of time when he had been ignored, he had indeed been worried about his gains and losses. He had not been able to eat or sleep well, and his mind had been filled with thoughts of the Empress. But thinking about it carefully, it was impossible for the Empress to know such a sophisticated trick. Her EQ was not much better than Xiaobai's. How could she come up with such a sophisticated trick? He shook his head, threw this bold and unrealistic thought out of his mind, and walked into the residence. The Empress had rewarded many things. Li Mu planned to pick some and send them to Zhang Chun. Old Zhang's protection of him in the imperial court was no less than Li Mu's protection of the Empress. Li Mu was very touched by this. He specially asked the Empress to reward Zhang Chun with a 3-sectioned residence. It was located in the North Court, not far from the Li residence. Although they were not neighbors, it was just a matter of walking a few steps. At this time, in a residence not far from the Li residence in the North Court, Zhang Chun stood at the door and ordered 2 palace guards. He said, move slowly. Don't break the things." Today, he finally fulfilled his wish of moving to a new residence. Although the residence was only changed from a 2-sectioned one to a 3-sectioned one, the location was worlds apart. This was the North Court, where the real high-ranking officials and dignitaries lived. If he lived here, he would not be embarrassed to say that he was an official in the imperial court. Zhang Chun pulled Madame Zhang around the new residence and asked, "How is it?" Madame Zhang said, "It's big enough, but the furniture is a bit old. Why don't we order some new ones?" Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "There's no need to waste money. It won't be too late to change after a few days when we get a bigger residence." Madame Zhang was shocked. She said, "This is already big enough. You want a bigger one?" Zhang Chun nodded firmly and said, 3-sectioned is nothing. At this rate, it's not impossible for us to get a 5-sectioned one. You can just wait to enjoy your life. Tidy up the room first. When you're done, I'll take you to Lord Li's residence for a walk." Madame Zhang sighed and said, "I knew that Constable Li had a bright future. I asked you to set him up with Yi, but you were unwilling. Now, there are so many girls in the Immortal's capital who want to marry him." Shoo! Zhang Chun covered her mouth and said, "Didn't I tell you not to mention this in the future? You must remember this. Otherwise, there won't even be a 2-sectioned or 3-sectioned residence, let alone a 5-sectioned one. You don't want us to bring our daughter back to the small courtyard of the Yamen, do you?" Chapter 302. The case of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights being instigated by his mother-in-law to frame his colleague had attracted widespread attention, both among the people and in the imperial court. Everyone's attention was on the Ministry of Justice as they paid close attention to the progress of this matter. Using despicable means to frame a colleague had crossed the bottom line of the imperial court. According to the law, both the Zhou family's wife and the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights would be severely punished. However, in the end, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights was only demoted from his position, while the fourth wife of the Zhou family only lost her status as a madam. This was because the Zhou family had taken out the 2 death exemption tokens bestowed by the late emperor. Although it was a bit wasteful to use death exemption tokens to absolve the crime, they had no choice but to do so. According to the law, as the mastermind, the fourth wife of the Zhou family would not only be stripped of her status as a madam, but she would also be demoted to a lowly status. If the Ministry of Justice was more ruthless, it would not be impossible for her to be classified as an official prostitute. The Zhou family was now considered a royal family. If the Zhou family's wife became an official prostitute, the Zhou family's face would be trampled on. The Zhou family would also become the laughingstock of the entire divine capital. The Zhou family had used the death exemption tokens to absolve the 2 of their crimes. However, the old party, especially the Xiao royal family, did not feel good about it. The Zhou family had seized the late emperor's empire, and now they had to use the death exemption tokens bestowed by the late emperor to absolve the Zhou family of their crimes. To the Xiao family, this was more disgusting than swallowing 100 flies. Fortunately, these 2 tokens would not appear in the future. Sooner or later, they would be disgusted. It was better to be disgusted sooner rather than later. A grand banquet was being held in a luxurious mansion in the southern court. At the banquet, everyone from the old party gathered. Apart from the officials of the imperial court, there were also many members of the Xiao royal family. The table was filled with delicacies. Everyone toasted and laughed. The Ministry of Justice's Zhou Zhong was undoubtedly the main character of this banquet. His position in the old party was extremely high. This time, he had made the Zhou family suffer such a huge loss and made a great contribution to the old party. The Zhou family scoundrels tried their best to curry favor with the late emperor when he was still alive and obtained 2 death exemption tokens from the late emperor. Every time I think of this in the past few years, it feels like a fishbone is stuck in my throat. Now that I've finally spat out this fishbone, it feels great. This is simply satisfying. The Zhou family's 2 death exemption tokens are gone. We have one less worry. Lord Zhou, let me toast to you. Lord Zhou, let me toast to you. Zhou Zhong was the main character of today's banquet. Even the original members of the royal family of the Xiao clan gave him enough respect. This also made the other officials present envious. Zhou Zhong held a high position, had the ability and the means, and was also highly regarded by the Xiao clan. After today, he would probably come into contact with even more secrets of the royal family. His future was limitless, and definitely would not be limited to the position of Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Once the Xiao clan regained power, his position in the court would be even higher than it was now. Imperial Palace, in front of Chang'e Palace. A palace maid on duty was on duty. A few figures came from afar and stopped beside her. She looked up and immediately bowed. "Greetings, Commander Mei." Mr. Mei glanced at her and said, "Take her away. Slap her 100 times and flog her 20 times. Send her to Fusho Palace." The palace maid seemed to realize something. Her face paled and her body trembled uncontrollably. Mr. Mei asked calmly, "Do you know why I punished you?" The palace maid knelt on the ground and said in a trembling voice, "Commander Mei, I know I was wrong. I know I was wrong." Mr. Mei glanced at her one last time and said, "As a servant in the palace, you have to abide by the palace rules. Don't listen to what you shouldn't hear, and don't say what you shouldn't say. Take her away and flog her outside Fusho Palace." Fusho Palace. Fusho Palace was located in the West Palace. It was originally the residence of the imperial concubines. The current empress didn't have any imperial concubines, And she didn't drive the former emperor's imperial concubines out of the West Palace. Fusho Palace was the residence of the old Empress Dowager. In the West Palace, the Empress Dowager was the leader, followed by the old Empress Dowager. Since the death of the former emperor, the old Empress Dowager had basically been in a state of seclusion. The West Palace was usually very quiet. Today, the silence of the West Palace was broken by a series of screams. A palace maid was escorted to the entrance of Fusho Palace by 2 internal guards. First, she was slapped 100 times. Then, she was pressed to the ground and flogged 20 times. Her miserable screams could be heard clearly in the West Palace. The West Palace was a quiet place. The internal guards didn't have the guts to do this. It must be the Empress order. The palace maid was not tortured in the Empress Dowager's everlasting palace, nor in front of the other old Empress Dowager's palaces. It couldn't be a coincidence that she chose the old Empress Dowager's Fusho Palace. It must be that the old Empress Dowager did something that displeased the Empress Dowager and touched the Empress Dowager's reverse scale. That was why she changed her respect for the old Empress Dowager and didn't give the old Empress Dowager any face. This was an obvious warning. In Fusho Palace, an old palace maid was angry. She said loudly, "There are so many places in the palace, but she chose to do it in front of our palace. Isn't this a show for the old Empress Dowager to see?" The old Empress Dowager sighed and said, "Yes, this is her warning to me. I didn't expect her to be so protective of that person. I was negligent." Not long after, a palace maid came in and said, "Old Empress Dowager, that palace maid fainted. Should we send her out of the West Palace?" The old Empress Dowager shook her head and said, "No matter what, she is still one of my people. Bring her into the palace and let her work in Fusho Palace." Then she looked at the old palace maid and asked, "How is Yunyang?" The old palace maid sighed and said, "The prince consort's accident was a big blow to the princess. She locked herself in the princess residence all day and didn't see anyone." The imperial concubine said, "No one would have thought that the one surnamed Chui was actually a spy from the devil sect. Go to the princess mansion and say that it was Aijia's order to let her come to Fusho Palace and stay with Aijia for a few days." Princess Yunyang's residence. After Chui Ming's identity as a spy was exposed and he escaped from Luoyang, Princess Yunyang locked herself in the residence. She didn't see anyone except for her personal maid who brought her food every day. At this time, in Princess Yunyang's room, she looked at a woman who suddenly appeared and asked in shock, "Who are you?" The woman smiled at her and said, "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that I am here to help you." Princess Yunyang said warily, "Leave quickly or I will shout for help." The woman shook her head and said, "Go ahead. I have sealed this place with an array. Even if you shout until your throat breaks, no one will hear you." Princess Yunyang said with a pale face, "What do you want?" The woman looked at her and said slowly, "Didn't I say that I am here to help you? Do you want to see the prince consort again? Do you want to sit on the highest position?" The woman's voice was bewitching. Princess Yunyang asked blankly, "What is the highest position?" The woman said, "Of course it is the supreme position. The position of the emperor." Princess Yunyang was shocked and said, "How is that possible?" The woman smiled and said, "If other women can sit there, why can't you? Don't forget that you have the blood of the Shao royal family and are the daughter of the late emperor. You are more suitable to sit on that position than her." In the room, Princess Yunyang pondered over her words and the wariness on her face gradually disappeared. Li residence. Li Mu already knew that the Zhou clan had used 2 death exemption gold medallions to save the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights and Zhou Chu's mother. He did not expect that the Zhou clan would have death exemption gold medallions. Although the 2 culprits were not severely punished by the law, it was not like they did not gain anything. Things like death exemption gold medallions should not exist in the first place. Using them meant one less piece. After he was done with this, Li Mu would find a way to destroy them sooner or later. But right now, he had more important things to do. The imperial examination was just around the corner. Even if he wrote the outline, the examination questions were set by the various ministries. He had to prepare. If he failed, not only would he lose face, he would also lose face for the empress. In addition, Cui Ming's matter had a great impact on the imperial court. The most direct impact was that the officials in the imperial court thought that everyone was a spy from the demon sect, especially those who were good-looking. They were especially suspected. After all, even the emperor's son-in-law, a fourth-rank official, had been infiltrated by the demon sect. They had set up a trap on Cui Ming for 20 years. Who knew if they had infiltrated other places? But for this kind of thing, besides soul-searching, it was almost impossible to find out the other party's identity after the spy was exposed. The imperial court was now in a state of panic. It made the officials panic and was not conducive to the stability of the situation. Li Mu had to advise the empress to stop investigating the demon sect's spies. Historical experience showed that this kind of heavy pressure was very disadvantageous to stability. In addition to what had just happened, many officials of the old and new parties were directly dismissed. There was already some turmoil in the imperial court. The imperial court could not be allowed to continue to be chaotic. The director of the Ministry of Rights, the vice director of the Ministry of Revenue, and the deputy minister of the Taichung Temple were dismissed. Those empty important positions were quickly filled. Many officials were promoted, and their original positions were left empty. It was just right to fill them after the imperial examination. The biggest winner of this framing storm was not Li Mu, but someone else. The assistant director of the Ministry of Rights had ruined his own future. His position was replaced by another director of the Ministry of Rights. This director Lu did not go along with the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights and participate in the impeachment of Li Mu. It just so happened that the Ministry of Rights was seriously short of people this time. He took advantage of this matter and rose up the ranks. From a director to an assistant director, he took the step and saved at least 10 years of suffering. He was probably the biggest winner of this matter. Shendu, a mansion in the North Courtyard. The new assistant director of the Ministry of Rights, Lu Qing, opened the door. Two children playing in the courtyard threw away their toys and ran over quickly. They opened their arms and said happily, "Daddy is back." Lu Qing picked up the two children, a boy and a girl, and played with them for a while. Then he put them down and said, "You two play by yourselves. Daddy is busy with official business." Because of the imperial examination, the officials of the Ministry of Rights were busy. Even after he went to the yamen, he still had many things to do. He walked into the study and habitually glanced at a bronze mirror on the table. His eyes narrowed slightly. A strange rune appeared on the bronze mirror. Lu Qing set up a soundproof formation and picked up the bronze mirror. After activating it with his spiritual power, a man's face appeared on the bronze mirror. Lu Qing's face darkened. He said, "You finally contacted me. How long do I have to stay in the Shendu?" The man said, 3 years. Lu Qing's face was filled with anger. He said sternly, 3 years again. That's what you said 3 years ago. 3 years ago, 3 years ago, you still said the same thing. I've been in the Shendu for 10 years. In order to not arouse suspicion, I bought a house, married a wife, and even had 2 children. I went from an 8th-rank official to an assistant director of the Ministry of Rights. Now you're telling me 3 years again. How many years has it been? The man frowned. Watch your attitude. Don't forget who helped you avenge your parents. Lu Qing snorted coldly. If it weren't for this matter, do you think I would listen to your nonsense here? Tell me, you haven't contacted me much in the past 10 years. What do you want me to do this time? The man said, I didn't contact you for your safety. Now, there's something important that I need your help with. The imperial examination is coming soon. I've arranged for some of our people to participate in the examination. You have to help them pass the examination. That's impossible. Lu Qing flatly rejected him. I don't need to say more about the importance of the imperial examination to the imperial court. This is the first year that the imperial court is free from the 4 academies. There must be countless eyes watching. The Ministry of Personnel, the Imperial Ancestral Temple, and the Internal Guards. No matter who has the ability, they can't do anything to the imperial examination. The man said lightly, As far as I know, the imperial examination is organized by the Ministry of Rites. You are the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites. Isn't it easy to help a few people? Lu Qing shook his head. The risk is too great. I can't do it. Who knew that Cui Ming was also your spy and accidentally exposed himself? Now the imperial court is investigating spies very closely. People like me are the main suspects. Every day, I go to the imperial court in fear. Do you know how much pressure I'm under? The man's voice was unquestionable. This is an order. I'm not discussing it with you. Don't forget who avenged your parents. If I didn't send you to the academy, you wouldn't be where you are today. You should know the consequences of disobeying orders. Your wife, your children, and you will all die without a burial place. Lu Qing looked out of the window at the two children who were laughing and playing in the yard. After a while, he withdrew his gaze and asked, "Aren't you afraid that I'll be exposed?" The man said lightly, "Cui Ming's identity was accidentally exposed. You are different from Cui Ming. You're my spy. Only I know your identity. As long as I don't say it, no one will know." Lu Qing was silent for a moment and said, "Okay." The man said, "I'll give you the list as soon as possible." Lu Qing asked, "Do they know my identity?" The man said, "No. The fewer people who know about your identity as a spy, the better." Lu Qing nodded and said, "I'll do my best to help them. But I can't guarantee that I won't be exposed. Over the years, I've been undercover in the imperial court and found a lot of secrets. Just in case, I have to give these things to you first. You need to come to Luoyang." The man was silent for a moment and said, 3 days later, 300 miles northwest of Luoyang. Chapter 303. After the morning court session, Li Mu did not leave the palace immediately. Mr. Mei was waiting for him outside the Ziwei Palace. She had received a signal from Li Mu during the court session. Seeing Li Mu walk out, she asked, "What's the matter?" Li Mu replied, "It's nothing important. How's the matter with Cui Ming?" Li Mu had been delayed by the case of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites, so he did not pay attention to the matter with Cui Ming. Ever since he escaped from Luoyang and Shangguan Li led people to hunt him down, there had been no news of him. Mr. Mei shook his head and said, "There's been no response from Ali for the time being. Cui Ming is now wanted by the 36 counties, so he definitely won't dare to show himself. He's probably hiding somewhere." Li Mu could only blame himself for not foreseeing this. If he had the sound-transmitting conch with him, Cui Ming's soul would have been scattered by now. But it was too late for regrets. Li Mu asked again, "How's the investigation of the demon sex spies going?" Mr. Mei shook his head and said, "Nothing. Even a 4th-rank official had been infiltrated. It was impossible to say that there were no spies from the demon sect in the Great Zhou court. Perhaps they were hiding in the court, but no one knew about them. The demon sect was after the Great Zhou. They had been infiltrating the court since 100 years ago and constantly stirring up trouble everywhere. Those who could be chosen as spies were not ordinary people. Their minds were abnormally firm, and they could hide for years or even decades without exposing themselves. The soul-sucking technique would not work on them, and the soul-searching technique was not realistic either. Even if a 10-year-old official in the imperial court looked cautious and conscientious, there was no guarantee that he did not have any ill intentions towards the Great Zhou dynasty. The entire Shin-du seemed calm and peaceful. However, no one knew how many undercurrents were lurking beneath this tranquility. Mr. Mei said, "If there are still spies from the demon sect or other forces in the imperial court, we won't be able to find them in such a short time. The most important thing now is the imperial examination. We have to make sure that there are no problems with the candidates from each county." Li Mu had already discussed this matter with the others when he was in the secretariat. Talents for the imperial examination were recommended by each county. The advantage was that it could break the academy's monopoly on the officials and reduce the omission of talents. The disadvantage was that the people recommended by each county were both good and bad. It would be fine if they were not talented, as they would not be able to pass the imperial examination. However, if they were talented but not virtuous, or were simply spies sent by various forces with ulterior motives, the harm to the great Zhou was continuous. Therefore, the selection of talents for the imperial examination was also regulated by the Hall of Secretaries when they formulated policies. The people chosen by the local government had to come from the local area and have a household register. Furthermore, within 3 generations, they could not commit any serious crimes. After passing the imperial examination, they would be further investigated by the Ministry of Justice. This would be able to keep out most of the people who broke the law. If they were still infiltrated under such high pressure, the imperial court would have to admit defeat. They could not search everyone's soul, and even if they did, they could not be 100% sure that there would be no problems. In order to prevent the spread of Taoist magic arts, the Haotian Taoism would let their core disciples cultivate some secret arts to prevent their secrets from being discovered. It was very likely that the demon sect also had such secret arts. That day in the Golden Palace, Cui Ming could fearlessly ask the Empress to search his soul. It was very likely that he was confident that he would not be discovered. Unfortunately, he had encountered an unreliable teammate. From this, it could be seen that the fewer people who knew about such a secret, the better. After leaving the palace, Li Mu returned to the North Court. There was still some time before the imperial examination, so he had enough time to prepare. Walking on the quiet streets of the North Court, he passed by a mansion. A woman came down from a carriage parked in front of the mansion. This woman did not expect to meet Li Mu here. She stared at him with hatred in her eyes. Li Mu and Zhou Chu's mother looked at each other. This woman with madness in her eyes was the mastermind behind this case. If it was not for the Zhou family's death exemption medallion, she would be in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, just like the former assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. The woman looked at Li Mu with madness in her eyes and said, "I let you escape this time. Next time, I don't know if you will be so lucky." Li Mu looked at her and said with a smile, "This is what I wanted to say to you. You are lucky this time. If there is a next time, do you think the Zhou family will still be able to protect you with a death exemption medallion?" Although Li Mu was smiling, his gaze made her feel cold. The woman did not dare to look at him again. She looked away and hurriedly walked into the mansion. In the mansion, a woman came up to her and supported her. She said, "Mother, why didn't you tell me you were coming? I would have asked Zhuang Yun to send someone to pick you up." A man also came up and bowed to her. He said, "Your son-in-law greets mother-in-law." The woman said, "I came here to ask Zhuang Yun for help." The man raised his eyebrows, but the smile on his face became even brighter. He asked, "What do you need, mother-in-law? Just say it." The woman gritted her teeth and said, "You know that Chu died tragically at the hands of that evil man, Li Mu. Your father is cruel and did not avenge Chu. Unfortunately, I am weak and can only watch that evil man roam freely in Luoyang. Zhuang Yun is the vice minister of the Supreme Court. He must have a way to avenge your brother." The man smiled and said, "Welcome, mother-in-law. Please rest in the inner courtyard." The woman asked, "Then about your brother?" The man said, "How can I not listen to mother-in-law? This is not the place to talk. Let's go in first." He led the woman in. When they entered the inner courtyard, his lips moved slightly but no sound came out. After entering the inner courtyard, the woman looked at the man. Just as she was about to speak, a servant suddenly rushed in from outside. He said, "Sir, it's not good. The Supreme Court sent someone. They said that there is an emergency in the temple. The minister wants you to go there immediately." The man looked at the woman and said awkwardly, "It's not convenient for me right now." The servant said, "I saw that person in a hurry. It seems that there is something important. If you delay it, I'm afraid the minister will blame you." The man looked helpless. He could only look at the woman and said, "Mother-in-law, it's really unfortunate. The Supreme Court has an emergency and needs me to deal with it. I will be back soon." After saying that, he strode out of the inner courtyard. He did not slow down until he walked out of the mansion. He said to the servant, "Stay at home. When she leaves, come to the Supreme Court and inform me." The servant asked, "What if she doesn't leave?" The man said, In a while, get someone to buy a bedding and send it to the Supreme Court. There are too many old cases in the Supreme Court. I'm afraid I will have to live in the Supreme Court from now on. When Li Mu returned home, he saw that the Empress was also there. Xiao Bai was teaching her how to make dumplings. This was something he envied the Empress for. The two of them left court at the same time, but she always arrived home earlier than Li Mu. Li Mu only needed to cross 2 streets to get home from the palace. She only needed a thought. The Empress was a cultivation genius. Her learning ability was naturally extraordinary. Chinese chess was taught to her by Li Mu, but she only used an hour to defeat him. As for making dumplings, Xiao Bai demonstrated it to her a few times, and she was able to make it look like it was real. After she learned how to make dumplings, Xiao Bai seemed very accomplished. She said, "I will teach Sister Zhou how to make dumplings later. In the future, if you want to eat them, you can make them at home." Zhou Yi put down the dumplings in her hands and said calmly, "Sister doesn't have a home." Xiao Bai was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled and said, "Sister Zhou, you can treat this as your home in the future." When Sister Lu and Sister Wan come back, we can make dumplings together. Li Mu could understand the Empress's feelings. To a certain extent, they were the same kind of people. They both had a home that they could not return to. The Empress's home was still there. However, to her, that home was not a home. Li Mu really could not return to his own home. Sensing Li Mu's sudden depression, Zhou Yi looked at him in confusion and asked, "What's wrong?" Li Mu shook his head and said with a smile, "It's nothing." His sadness only lasted for a moment. If he were given 2 choices, to return to the world he was familiar with or to stay here, Li Mu would choose the latter without hesitation. In the other world, he had no more worries. In this world, not only could he realize his childhood dreams, but there were also many people he cared about. During this period, the Empress had been coming to Luo Yunyang more often. She also stayed longer and longer. In the morning court, she was the lofty and majestic Empress. After the morning court session, she was the big sister next door, Zhou Qiong. She cooked together with Xiao Bai, went shopping together, and trimmed the garden together. Perhaps even the courtiers would not dare to believe that the person they saw on the streets was Her Majesty the Empress. As the day of the imperial examinations approached, the atmosphere in Chengdu gradually became tense. Students from all over the country gathered there. They were about to take part in an examination that could change their fates for the rest of their lives. Everyone cherished this opportunity very much. This was especially true for those who did not come from noble families or noble families. This was their only chance to change their fate and bring benefits to their juniors. This was an opportunity given to them by the Empress. In a certain inn in Chengdu, Li Mu was training Li Si before the examination. Although he was suspected of being a judge when he took part in the examination, if he did not take part, he could only be a constable and an imperial censor. There were also many restrictions when he worked for the Empress in the imperial court. During this period, many inns in Chengdu had earned a lot because the imperial examinations were approaching. Even though they had raised the price several times, the rooms still could not meet the demand. In a certain room on the 2nd floor of a remote inn far away from the imperial city, 4 figures were gathered around a table, staring at a bronze mirror on the table. One of them used blood to write a complicated rune on the bronze mirror. Then he used his magic power to activate it. The bronze mirror flashed, but there was no change. That person had a puzzled look on his face. "That's impossible. That lord clearly said that when we reach Chengdu and activate this magic artifact, he will immediately contact us. In the past 3 days, we have tried many times. Why hasn't he responded even once?" Chapter 304. These days, Li Si's performance really exceeded Li Mu's expectations. Back in the North County, with Chen Miao Miao by his side, it was understandable that Li Si restrained himself. But this was the divine capital, thousands of miles away from the North County. Chen Miao Miao was far away on Baiyun Mountain. Li Si didn't hang around brothels or hook up with girls. After all, he had lost his primordial yang long ago. Even if he really messed around in the divine capital, Chen Miao Miao wouldn't find out. But he didn't. He locked himself in his room all day to prepare for the exam. If he didn't have to go to the Ministry of Justice to check his identity today, he might not even leave the inn. When he indulged himself, Li Mu was shocked. When he restrained himself, Li Mu was shocked. On the way to the Ministry of Justice, Li Si asked, "How's your friend?" Li Mu asked, "Which friend?" As soon as he said this, he remembered who Li Si was talking about. Li Mu said, "You're right. He and that girl have reconciled, but it's not like what you said. There's just a small misunderstanding between them. It'll be fine after they explain it clearly." Li Si raised his eyebrows. "It's not like that?" Li Mu said, "Between a man and a woman, besides love, there's also friendship. It's not necessarily like what you said." Li Si asked, "Is she beautiful?" Li Mu nodded. "Yes." In all fairness, the Empress's appearance was at least in the top 10 of the divine capital's 100 beauties. Whether she wore a dragon robe or ordinary clothes, she was beautiful. Li Si asked again, "Is your friend handsome?" Li Mu said, "He's as handsome as me." Li Si looked at him meaningfully but didn't say anything. Li Mu looked up and said, "We've arrived at the Ministry of Justice." Even though the 36 counties had already investigated the identities of the candidates, the imperial court still had to investigate again in order to prevent people with ulterior motives from mixing in. A long queue had already formed at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice. They were all the examinees who were here for the identity verification today. Among them, Li Mu saw many wearing the uniforms of the 3 academies. Although the imperial court no longer chose officials directly from the students of the academy, the students of the academy still had a lot of privileges in the imperial examinations. Any student of the academy could directly participate in the imperial examinations without being nominated by the local government. The academy had a history of 100 years and had contributed far more to the Great Zhou than to the destruction. It was unrealistic to directly exclude the academy from the imperial examination. In fact, although the imperial court had introduced the imperial examination, it still could not change the special status of the academy. The students who had been taught in the academy for a few years were far superior to the local talents in terms of character and talent in all aspects. In order to completely change the academy's domination of the imperial court, they had to strengthen the local basic education. This was not something that could be changed overnight. Of course, the academy was also aware of this. Therefore, when the Empress almost arbitrarily carried out the imperial examination, there was not much resistance from the academy. Whether it was changed or not, it did not have a big impact on the academy. Although Li Mu had acquaintances in the Ministry of Justice, he did not openly seek special treatment. He stood at the back of the queue with Li Si. However, when he stood in the queue, a few students in front of him who were wearing the academy's uniforms did not even line up. They moved far away and looked at him in horror. The scene of Li Mu grabbing people at the entrance of the 3 academies with a metal chain in his hand was still engraved in their minds. They were really worried that Li Mu would suddenly conjure a metal chain in his hand and directly put it around their necks. In the 3 academies, Li Mu's name was taboo. The bailiffs of the Ministry of Justice quickly noticed the abnormality here. They thought that someone was causing trouble. Immediately, 2 bailiffs came over. When they saw Li Mu, they were shocked and quickly invited him into the Ministry of Justice. Li Mu was here to check his identity this time, not to cause trouble. However, it was obvious that his presence here would affect the normal order of the examination. He had no choice but to walk into the Ministry of Justice with Li Si. The examination this time was supervised by the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Personnel, the Ministry of Rights, and the Imperial Clan Temple. In the front yard of the Ministry of Justice stood several officials from different offices. It was obvious that the imperial court attached great importance to the imperial examination. Zhou Zhong walked over slowly and asked, "Lord Li, what brings you to the Ministry of Justice today?" Li Mu said, "To participate in the identity examination." Zhou Zhong asked, "Lord Li wants to participate in the imperial examination?" Li Mu glanced at him and asked, "Can't I?" The officials then realized that although Li Mu had caused a lot of trouble in the divine capital, He was not an official of the imperial court from the academy. He was only a bailiff and an imperial censor, but he was already able to cause a lot of trouble in the imperial court. If he passed the imperial examination and had an official identity, what would happen? Yes. Zhou Zhong nodded and said, Lord Li, you don't have to be examined anymore. Li Mu shook his head and said, there are no exceptions before the imperial examination. Lord Zhou, just treat me as an ordinary examinee. Zhou Zhong did not say anything else. He brought Li Mu to a government office. In the office, an official from the Ministry of Justice was sitting and questioning a young man. Name: Chen Liang. Place of birth: Jiangyin County, Jiangqing County. Who recommended you? The county magistrate of Jiangqing. There was a small bell on the table in front of the young man. It should be a Dharma instrument used to detect lies. If he lied and caused the instrument to respond, it would be difficult for him to walk out of the Ministry of Justice today. After the young man walked out, the official from the Ministry of Justice said, next. Another examinee was about to enter but was stopped by Zhou Zhong. He was unhappy and looked sideways. Then he immediately retracted his head and took a step back to make room. Li Mu walked in under Zhou Zhong's signal and placed the examination papers on the table. The official from the Ministry of Justice did not even raise his head and asked, name? Li Mu. Place of birth: North County, Yangqiu County. Who recommended you? Your Majesty. Who? The official from the Ministry of Justice raised his head. The people recommended by the local people were usually the county magistrate or governor. He did not know who the emperor was. When he raised his head to confirm, he saw Li Mu and was stunned for a moment. He immediately stood up and said, Lord Li, that's enough. Zhou Zhong looked at the official and said, write me down as the recommended person. This kind of examination was just a formality. It was difficult to detect people with ulterior motives through the Dharma instrument. After the imperial examinations ended, those who passed would be examined in more detail. After Li Mu, Li Si passed the examination quickly. When the two of them walked back to the courtyard, an official hurried in and said to Zhou Zhong and the others, sorry, I'm late. The assistant minister looked at him and frowned. The imperial examinations are the most important thing in the imperial court. How can you be so careless? Sorry, cough cough. The official said apologetically. Suddenly, he covered his mouth and coughed. There was blood coming out of his mouth. The officials were shocked and quickly asked, Lord Lu, what's wrong? The official waved his hand and said, something went wrong with my cultivation last night and I suffered internal injuries. It's nothing, one of the officials said. Lord Lu, why don't you return to your residence and rest? With us here, nothing will happen. Lord Lu, take care of your body is more important. The official shook his head and said, the imperial examinations are the most important thing in the imperial court. How can I leave my post without permission? It's just a small injury. It's nothing. Li Mu already knew the identity of this person. He was the new assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. Last time, when Li Mu was framed, this person was the one who benefited the most. When the Ministry of Rights was short of manpower and was facing the imperial examinations, they urgently needed officials to preside over them. He, who had just been transferred to the Ministry of Rights, was promoted to Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights. This saved him at least 10 years of struggle. Seeing him vomit blood, there were still officials who asked uncertainly, Lord Lu, are you really okay? Lu Qing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, I'm fine. When the crowd saw this, they could not help but respect him. Before today, when they mentioned this assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights, they only thought that he was lucky to climb to his current position. Now, it seemed that this person was so ruthless to himself that it was no coincidence that he was able to climb to his current position. This was also the first time Li Mu had seen such a ruthless person. He couldn't help but take a few more glances. He realized that, besides being ruthless to himself, this assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights was also rather handsome. Although he was not as bewitching as Cui Ming, he could definitely be considered a handsome man, comparable to several Zhang Chuns. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights also noticed him. He clasped his hands and said, "This must be Lord Li Mu. My apologies, my apologies." Li Mu clasped his hands and said, "Lord Lu has truly worked hard for the imperial court." Lu Qing chuckled and said, "This official is only doing what is required of me. I can't compare to Lord Li's contributions to the imperial court." As the two exchanged a few words of praise, they suddenly heard quarreling from the side. "Why can't I take the examination? Give it back to me. Go, go, go. Don't delay the others here." Li Mu turned his head and saw a familiar figure. Wei Peng was being pushed out by two officials from the Ministry of Justice. His face was red as he argued with them about something. Li Mu quickly understood the reason. If Wei Peng had come to the Ministry of Justice to examine his qualifications for the imperial examination, there was a very high chance that he would not pass. His father, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, Wei Teng, had just been removed from his post by the Empress. According to the rules, the first 3 generations of the Wei clan could not participate in the imperial examination. Wei Peng was currently the son of a guilty official, so he naturally could not pass the examination of the Ministry of Justice. Zhou Zhong walked over and glanced at Wei Peng. He asked the official from the Ministry of Justice, "What's going on?" The official bowed and said, "Lord Lu, this person is the son of a guilty official. According to the law, he cannot participate in the imperial examination." Zhou Zhong said, "The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue was convicted after he received the examination. The Ministry of Justice's examination is only for those with bad intentions. Since he received the examination, he has the qualifications to participate in the imperial examination. The Ministry of Justice has no right to take away his right to participate." Since the assistant minister had already spoken, the official from the Ministry of Justice did not dare to say more. He obediently returned the examination to Wei Peng. Wei Peng took the examination and bowed to Zhou Zhong. "Thank you, Lord Lu." Zhou Zhong indifferently glanced at him and said, "I am acting according to the law." Chapter 305. Li Mu did not expect Zhou Zhong to help Wei Peng out of trouble. In principle, Wei Teng had already become a criminal. The 3rd generation of the Wei family could not take the imperial examinations. As Wei Teng's son, Wei Peng did not even have the right to take the imperial examinations. Zhou Zhong's reason, if one looked closely, did not hold water. However, he was the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. The reason he gave sounded a little reasonable. Since he protected Wei Peng, the officials of the Ministry of Justice did not dare to say anything. The officials of the Ministry of Personnel, the Ministry of Rights, and the Ancestral Temple also did not stand up against him for such an insignificant matter. After the examination, Li Mu and Li Si left the Ministry of Justice. As the crowd at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice moved, another examinee stepped into the yamen to be questioned by the officials of the Ministry of Justice. Name. Place of birth. Yushan County. Outside the yamen, upon hearing this name, the eyes of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights flashed. He suddenly said, "This is the first imperial examination of the imperial court. It is of great significance to the great Zhou. I fear that there will be various factions trying to disrupt the examination. We must be careful." The minister said, "It is precisely because of this that the Ministry of Justice is conducting today's examination." Lu Qing shook his head slightly and said, "In my opinion, the magic treasure used by the Ministry of Justice to detect lies is more like a decoration. Those who are magnanimous will naturally not fear it. Those who are truly guilty will definitely have something to rely on if they dare to come to the Ministry of Justice. They will not fear this magic treasure." The minister thought for a moment and nodded. Assistant Minister Lu's words are reasonable. However, it is impossible to perform a soul search on everyone. Not only is it difficult to carry out, it is also easy to cause chaos. Lu Qing shook his head. Naturally, there is no need to investigate everyone. As long as we investigate those who are highly suspicious, we can eliminate most of the risks. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel snorted disdainfully. It is easy for you to say. How do we know who we should suspect and who we should not? Lu Qing glanced at him and said, as we all know, demon sex spies generally require a handsome appearance. Cui Ming is an example. The imperial examination is of great importance. It's not too much to examine candidates who are too handsome. After some thought, Minister Zhongzhen said, I think that Sir Lu's words make sense. The imperial examination concerns the future of the imperial court. No matter how careful we are, we can't be too careful. If we find out later, I'm afraid we won't be able to escape the blame. After discussing with each other, they all agreed to Lu Qing's suggestion. It was just a little more effort. If it could eliminate some of the risks that might erupt in the future, it was worth it. Lu Qing pointed at an examinee who had walked out of the office and said, You, come over here. The examinee, Zhou Jing, walked over nervously and asked, Sir, do you have any orders? Lu Qing asked, What's your name? The examinee said, My name is Xen Hao. Lu Qing looked at Zhou Zhong and the others and said, This examinee's appearance is extremely outstanding. Why don't we start with him? I've been injured in my cultivation recently and can't use too much mana. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you all. Zhou Zhong walked out and said, I'll do it. The examinee's face was filled with shock and worry. He didn't understand and said, Sir, what is this for? Lu Qing patted him on the shoulder and said, Don't worry. We're just going to perform a simple soul search on you. If there are no problems, we'll let you go. The examinee was confused and said, Why? We didn't say that today's examination needed a soul search. Why didn't the others use it? Lu Qing comforted him and said, Don't be afraid. Sir Zhou is just going to ask you a few simple questions. After you're done, you can leave. The young man called Xen Hao, although his expression was calm, the fear in his heart had already reached an extreme. That official didn't tell him that the Ministry of Justice's initial investigation required a soul capture. He only said that they had people in the court who would help them pass the imperial examination and avoid the subsequent investigations. Without any prior preparation, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't say something that he shouldn't say when his soul capture was carried out. Lu Qing saw his hesitation and asked, What, is there a problem? Xen Hao shook his head and said, No. If he did not resist, he might be able to get away with it. As long as he showed the slightest sign of resistance, he would probably immediately give himself away. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, he had already obtained a secret dossier beforehand. Within the dossier, there was detailed information on most of the officials in the court. This Zhou Zhong, the Assistant Minister of Justice, had the strength of the fifth realm. In order to resist a soul search, he had deliberately trained his mind. With the strength of the Assistant Minister of Justice, it should be impossible for him to break through the defenses in his heart. Thinking of this, he was much more relieved. He walked up to Zhou Zhong of his own accord and said, Sir, you may begin. Zhou Zhong nodded and said, Look into my eyes. Xen Hao raised his head and looked into Zhou Zhong's eyes. He only felt that Zhou Zhong's eyes had suddenly become a whirlpool, as if trying to suck in all of his mind. However, his mind was extremely firm. Although there was confusion in his eyes, as if his soul had already been searched, in the depths of his heart, he had always maintained a clear mind. Xen Hao thought that Zhou Zhong would immediately ask him questions, but he quickly discovered that Zhou Zhong's soul search had not stopped. On the contrary, the whirlpool in Zhou Zhong's eyes spun faster and faster. It was so fast that the part of his mind he used to maintain his consciousness was uncontrollably sucked in by the whirlpool. In his shock, Xen Hao wanted to immediately look away. It was also at this moment that the whirlpool in Zhou Zhong's eyes spun at its peak speed, completely controlling his mind. After an unknown amount of time, Xen Hao finally felt his consciousness return. He saw Zhou Zhong looking at him expressionlessly. The officials standing around him all had shocked expressions. Xen Hao had already realized what had happened. Without hesitation, he activated a magic treasure he had hidden in his sleeve. His body disappeared from where he stood. The next time he appeared, he was already outside the Ministry of Justice. He placed a fulu on his body and turned into a ray of light, dashing into the distance. Trying to run? They are indeed spies from the demon sect. How dare they? A few auras shot into the sky from the Ministry of Justice and headed in the direction he had disappeared. The sudden change of events stunned the candidates who were still queuing up outside the Ministry of Justice. On the streets of the divine capital, Li Mu had just parted ways with Li Si. He was about to head home when he suddenly raised his head and looked behind him. A figure could be seen flying across the sky at a rapid speed. In the divine capital, unless there were special circumstances, flying was prohibited. There were a few figures chasing after the person. Li Mu sensed a familiar aura among the figures. After he reacted, he raised his hand and a golden ray of light flew out from his hand. After the sound of wind breaking, the figure that was flying in front suddenly stopped. His body was tied up by a golden rope, and the Fa Li in his body was quickly sealed. He fell from the sky and fainted. When Li Mu walked to his side, the other figures also descended from the sky. He looked at Zhou Zhong and asked, "What's going on?" Zhou Zhong glanced at the person on the ground and said, "This person is a spy from the demon sect. After I used the soul assimilation technique on him, he tried to escape." "Thank you for your help, Lord Li," Li Mu said. "It was just a matter of convenience. You could have caught him even if I didn't do anything." Then, he asked in surprise, "How did you find out that he was a spy from the demon sect?" Zhou Zhong said, "This person is handsome and attracted Lord Lu's suspicion. After I used the soul assimilation technique on him, I found out that he was a spy from the demon sect." The Assistant Minister of Personnel looked at Lu Qing and said, "Lord Lu's eyes are as sharp as torches. You saw through his identity with a single glance." Lu Qing waved his hand and said, "I don't have such ability. I just happen to be lucky." The Deputy Minister sighed and said, "Lord Lu's luck is really good these days." He had just been transferred to the Ministry of Rights when the Assistant Minister of Rights was in trouble. Coincidentally, the Ministry of Rights was short of people for the imperial examination, so he was promoted to Assistant Minister. The first person he met with was a spy from the demon sect. His luck was really unparalleled. In this short period of time, Zhou Zhong had already completed the soul assimilation technique on this person. He said in a low voice, "He still has 3 accomplices in the inn. Lords, follow me and take down these demon sect spies." On the first day of the Ministry of Justice's investigation, they found out that there were spies from the demon sect who tried to sneak into the imperial examination. If they were lucky enough to pass the imperial examination and avoid the investigation, they would bring a lot of trouble to the imperial court. In addition, through the soul assimilation technique on these 4 people, they found out that there were still spies from the demon sect in the Great Zhou court. This news caused quite a stir in the imperial court. However, the 4 people didn't know the identity of the spy. The imperial court could only wait for this person to reveal himself. Only then would they find out. Cui Ming had been a spy for more than 10 years before he was accidentally discovered. No one knew who the next Cui Ming would be. The newly promoted Assistant Minister of Rights had undoubtedly contributed the most in this incident. If it weren't for his suggestion, these 4 demon sect spies wouldn't have been discovered so early. There had always been rumors in the imperial court about Lu Qing's promotion to Assistant Minister of Rights. They believed that he had relied on luck to obtain his current position. If it weren't for the previous Assistant Minister of Rights accident and the Ministry of Rights confirmation, this position wouldn't have been his. This time, these people all shut their mouths. Luck was also a kind of strength. Why was it that he was always the one with good luck? This already explained everything. After this incident, although Lu Qing didn't receive any rewards, his wife received the status of a woman with a title. This meant that this newly appointed Assistant Minister of Rights and his family had truly stepped into the ranks of the nobility in the divine capital. Lu Manor. In the study, Lu Qing snapped his fingers, and a ball of flame appeared out of thin air. A bronze mirror on the table slowly flew up. After being enveloped by the flame, it quickly melted and turned into a pool of bronze liquid. Chapter 306. The imperial examinations were the cradle of the Great Zhou's officials. Li Mu guessed that the opposing powers of the Great Zhou wouldn't let go of this opportunity. However, he didn't expect the demon sect to be so brazen. It was a pity that they had gone through so much trouble to open up a path and send the spy to the divine capital, only to lose in an unexpected way. Spies were suspected because they were too handsome. After this matter, it was likely that the several demonic path sects would change their bad habit of judging people by their appearance. The more handsome and beautiful a spy was, the easier it was to arouse suspicion and the easier it was to be exposed. Of course, this wasn't necessarily a good thing for the imperial court. If the demon sect changed their habit of judging people by their appearance, it would be more difficult for the imperial court to find the spy. The investigation by Cui Ming and the Ministry of Justice made Li Mu realize that the demon sect's infiltration of the Great Zhou court had reached a level where they would stop at nothing. This power that covered the entire ancestral state was like a terrorist organization, stirring up storms in various countries. The Great Zhou seemed powerful, but the imperial court was divided internally by the new party and the old party. Apart from internal troubles, there were also many external troubles. The Ghost Realm and the Demon Nation wanted to leave Yudu and the wilderness, and the Dragon race didn't want to stay in the dark depths of the sea forever. The surrounding countries seemed to be subservient, but they were probably already disloyal behind the scenes. They were happy to see the Great Zhou wither away and collapse. In addition to the demon sect's invasion, this prosperous country was already riddled with holes. The Empress had probably realized this long ago. She didn't want to be the Empress, but she had no choice but to sit in that position. In the entire Great Zhou, she was the only one who could convince everyone to sit in that position. Once she gave up, the new party and the old party would inevitably cause an even greater dispute. When that time came, with internal and external troubles, the Great Zhou's empire might come to an end. She would also become the last empress in the history of the Great Zhou. The Empress definitely did not want to become the ruler of a fallen country, so she was facing a dilemma. Li Mu sat at the stone table in the courtyard and looked at the Empress, who was watering the flowers in the garden with Xiao Bai. He thought to himself, the pressure of the rise and fall of the country is all on her shoulders. It's not strange that she would develop inner demons or split personalities. He had to pay more attention to the imperial examinations. Only by passing the imperial examinations would he be qualified to share some of the Empress's burden. Amidst the tense atmosphere in Shendu, the first imperial examination in the history of Great Zhou arrived as scheduled. This was also the first time in history that the imperial court had bypassed the 4 academies and had the power to choose officials. The imperial examination system had taken the secretariat more than a month to come up with. The examinees had to complete the 4 subjects within 3 days. Out of the 4 subjects, the first 3 were liberal arts. They were mathematics, criminal law, and policy. The last subject was martial arts, which tested the examinees' cultivation. Among them, the first 3 subjects were the most important. The cultivation level of the martial arts was only used as a reference. Apart from the 36 prefectures, which required officials with profound cultivation, most of the positions in the imperial court did not have any requirements for the official's cultivation level or cultivation level. The questions for the mathematics subject were set by the Ministry of Revenue. The criminal law subject was set by the Ministry of Justice. As for policy, the questions were set by the head of the Secretariat and the 6 officials of the Secretariat. A month ago, the Ministry of Works had built the examination hall in Shendu at the fastest speed possible. The examination hall could accommodate thousands of examinees. This morning, the first mathematics exam was held. In the examination hall, officials from various departments of the imperial court took turns to invigilate the exam. None of the invigilators' cultivation was lower than the 4th realm. There were many 5th and 6th realm heads of the Secretariat who personally guarded the examination hall. Under such circumstances, no one could cheat. In a certain room in the examination hall, Li Mu received the mathematics exam paper for the first subject. He had fought hard to make mathematics a compulsory subject and a separate subject. Back then, he had even quarreled with a few officials of the Secretariat because of this. Those officials of the Secretariat thought that mathematics was a side subject and should not have a separate subject. In the end, Li Mu persuaded them with reason and emotion, and they were finally convinced. This mathematics exam paper was as simple as it could get for Li Mu. The Minister of Revenue had set the questions according to his outline. Although the format and numbers had been changed, the essence was still the same. In terms of mathematics attainments, Li Mu could dominate the great show. There were a lot of questions in mathematics. Even Li Mu took almost an hour to finish the entire paper. Then, he put the paper into a paper bag and sealed it with a fulu. The Minister of Revenue personally set the questions for the first subject of mathematics. During the mathematics exam, he patrolled the examination hall. According to his estimation, out of the thousands of examinees, not many could finish all the questions in 4 hours. However, after only an hour, he saw someone leave the examination hall after handing in their papers. He recognized Li Mu and looked at his back as he left. He said disdainfully, "You're just relying on His Majesty's favor to jump up and down in the imperial court. When faced with a test of real ability, you have to show your true colors." Lu Yi was beside him and asked, "Minister, are you talking about Li Mu?" The Minister of Revenue said, "Who else could it be? My exam paper is difficult for an ordinary person to answer in 4 hours. He left in an hour. I'm afraid he didn't calculate much." Lu Yi shook his head and said, "Minister, do you know who came up with the mathematics exam paper?" The Minister of Revenue asked, "Isn't it your minister?" Lu Yi said, "It's Lord Li." The Minister of Revenue was stunned for a moment. He then asked, "You mean to say that the exam paper I received was written by him? He came up with the mathematics exam paper himself?" Lu Yi nodded and said, "You can understand it that way." The Minister of Revenue frowned and said, "How can that be?" Lu Yi said, "Minister, you don't have to doubt the fairness of the mathematics exam. Lord Li's attainments in mathematics are probably unmatched in the entire Great Zhou. Otherwise, the Secretariat wouldn't have let him write the mathematics exam paper. With Lord Li's ability, he doesn't need to prove himself in the imperial examination. During the month in the Secretariat, Lu Yi and the others had a deep understanding of Li Mu. Other people's impression of him might be that he was a hothead who cursed the heavens and the earth, but the 6 officials of the Secretariat of the Central Secretariat knew very well that Li Mu was not only proficient in mathematics and criminal law, but also often had unique opinions when it came to political affairs. He didn't need to use the imperial examination to prove his ability. This was because the imperial examination used his ability as a blueprint to select talents. The imperial examination lasted for 3 days. The first day tested mathematics in the morning, criminal law in the afternoon, policy on the second day, and cultivation on the last day. Mathematics was very simple for Li Mu. However, the criminal law exam was different. Criminal law was one of the 4 subjects of the imperial examination. It was extremely important. After receiving the exam paper, Li Mu knew that the person who came up with the questions was something. There wasn't a single question in the entire exam paper that tested the original text of the law of the Great Zhou. All of the questions on criminal law were based on case studies. Moreover, they weren't simple cases. The cases involved were often more complicated. Sometimes, there would be discussions on law and morality. Li Mu often had to think for a long time before he could write down many of the questions. When he was leaving after the exam, Li Mu happened to meet the director of the Ministry of Justice and asked him a question. According to the director of the Ministry of Justice, the questions on criminal law were set by the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong. This was the same as Li Mu's guess. Only he could come up with such strange questions. The policy questions on the second day were much simpler for him. This subject was about how to govern a country. The students of the 3 great academies were very good at this. The policy questions were set by the Secretariat. During that month, Li Mu and the 6 officials of the Secretariat discussed it countless times. Other than the criminal law exam, the other 2 subjects were basically the same as the questions that Li Mu came up with and answered by himself. In the future, if he was short on money, He could write a few sets of mock exam papers and set up a pre-imperial examination class. Those who were qualified to receive education and could participate in the imperial examination were mostly rich people. A few sets of exam papers would allow him to make a lot of money. This was much faster than opening a shop. It was a completely cost-free business. Chapter 307. After careful consideration, Li Mu dismissed the idea of starting a pre-examination class. The imperial examination was a channel for the imperial court to select officials. It was a very serious matter. If he really did that, he would be looking down on the imperial court. If a cultivator wanted money, it was very simple. They could draw a few fulu and sell them to mortals. They would be able to obtain countless gold and silver items. The 3 examinations from 2 days ago had been completed. From now on, the fate of all the examinees in the imperial examination was decided. The results of the 3 examinations would determine whether or not they could pass the imperial examination. As for the combat examination, it would not affect the final results of the imperial examination. The combat examination was a separate subject. Those who performed well in the combat examination would receive more attention from the imperial court. They would have more opportunities to hold important positions in the imperial court in the future. For the last question, Li Mu did not hand in his paper early. Instead, he waited for Li Si to come out after the gong sounded. Seeing Li Si come out, Li Mu walked over and asked, "How was it?" Li Si said, "There are a few questions that I don't know how to answer, but it's not a big problem." After saying that, he looked at Li Mu strangely and asked, "You really didn't come up with the imperial examination questions?" Out of the 3 questions, he felt that the only difficult one was the criminal law. The laws that he memorized were almost useless. Fortunately, he had many years of experience as a constable in Yangqiu County. Even if he had never solved a case, he had seen Lord Zhang solve a lot of cases. Moreover, the law was used to maintain social justice. There were many questions that did not need to follow the law. A normal person could make the correct judgment based on their intuition. As for the mathematics and policy questions, other than a few, he could easily answer most of the questions. It was not because he was proficient in these 2 questions, but because these questions were all in the key points that Li Mu had highlighted for him. He could not help but suspect that Li Mu was the one who came up with the imperial examination questions. Li Si was not a big problem, so Li Mu did not need to worry about him. For Li Si, it was enough as long as he did not fail the rankings. With his cultivation, he would at least be able to obtain an evaluation of B in the martial examination tomorrow. His future development would even be above that of his father-in-law. The combat examination wasn't a competition between examinees. Instead, the examiners would assess the students' abilities based on their performance. The results of the combat examination from top to bottom were divided into B, C, and it. Each grade was further divided into 3 subgrades. At noon on the 3rd day, all the examinees gathered at the examination grounds. The examinees who had never cultivated before did not need to participate in the combat examination. They could just watch from the sidelines. There were thousands of examinees in the imperial examination this time, and there seemed to be close to 1,000 cultivators. The combat examination was held by the Ministry of War. Among the 3 provinces and 6 departments of the imperial court, the Ministry of War was a very special department. Since the establishment of the Great Zhou, the purpose of the Ministry of War's existence was to defend against foreign invasions. They rarely participated in ordinary national affairs. All the generals of the Great Zhou were under the command of the Ministry of War. They led troops to guard the borders of the Great Zhou, guarding against the Ghost Realm and Yao Nation. They usually did not leave easily. The reform of the imperial examination this time had a great impact on the other 3 academies. However, it did not affect White Deer Academy much. White Deer Academy nurtured talented generals. After the students of White Deer Academy left the academy, they would go to guard the borders instead of staying in the divine capital. Naturally, they would not form factions in the imperial court. The officials of the Ministry of War all had deep cultivations. The Minister of War was the Dean of White Deer Academy. He was also the only 7th-level expert among the officials of the imperial court. The 2 assistant ministers were both 6th-level cultivators. The few directors of the Ministry of War were 5th-level cultivators. Even the small minister counselor was at the peak of the 4th level. The one in charge of the combat examination this time was the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War. The 1,000 examinees with cultivation were divided into 10 groups. Each group had about 100 people. There would be 2 examiners in each group. They would evaluate the overall strength of the examinees and give the final results. The Ministry of War nurtured talented generals and placed great emphasis on the actual combat ability of the examinees. The method of the combat examination was also very simple. Without using fulu or dharma treasures, the examinees had to rely on their own cultivation to attack the examiners. The longer they could last against the examiners, the higher the result they would receive. On the drill ground, one of the examiners in Li Mu's group pointed at the examinee at the front of the group and said, "You, come out. Choose a weapon and attack me with all your strength." That examinee looked refined. He was only in the soul refinement realm. Moreover, he looked like he had just refined 2 or 3 souls. He picked a sword from the weapon rack at the side and swung it straight at the examiner. Bang! Just as he got close to the examiner, the sword in his hand was kicked away. He stood there blankly. The examiner glanced at him and said indifferently, "Your Majesty Ding." Beside the drill ground, a clerk recorded the examinee's result. The examiner shook his head in disappointment. He looked at the next examinee and said, "You, come out." The second examinee had already refined 5 souls. It was clear that he had learned the rock leap technique. His footwork and figure seemed to have some kind of routine. He managed to last a few more moves against the examiner. After sending him flying with a kick, the examiner said calmly, "Your Majesty Ding, next. Your Majesty Ding, next. Your Majesty Ding, continue." Li Mu stood in the crowd and watched the examinees in front of him take the test one by one. Their results had a lot to do with their cultivation. Generally speaking, if they were in the soul refinement realm, they would be classified as Grade D. As for whether they were Grade D, or Grade D, it would depend on their performance in the test. In the combat test, they could use their own Dharma spells and abhijna, but they could not rely on Fulu Dharma treasures or other external objects. Li Mu could tell that the Ministry of War was very concerned about the examinees' actual combat ability. Even if they were only in the soul refinement realm, if they were able to last a few more moves against the examiner, they might be evaluated as Grade C. If they were in the soul condensation realm but only had dermic powers and were defeated in 1 or 2 moves, they would only be given Grade D. The examiner did not bully the examinees. When he encountered soul refinement realm examinees, he would only use the dermic powers of the soul refinement realm. When he encountered soul condensation realm and spirit condensation realm examinees, he would raise his dermic powers to maintain the same level as the examinees. However, the difference between cultivators of the same realm could sometimes be so great that it was unimaginable. This examiner was very experienced in actual combat. Even if they were of the same cultivation level, he could easily crush these examinees. This must have been trained from hundreds of battles. From the murderous aura emanating from his body, it was not hard to guess that he had been on a real battlefield before. Be it soul refinement realm or spirit condensation realm examinees, they were powerless against him. As for transcendent realm examinees, Li Mu had not seen them in this group yet. This kind of crushing battle started and ended quickly. Soon, it was Li Mu's turn. The examiner looked at Li Mu and asked, "What's your name?" Li Mu walked out and said, "Li Mu." If there was no important matter, officials of the Ministry of War would not attend court. Only now did the examiner know that the person in front of him was Li Mu, the one who had been causing chaos in the fairies' capital recently. This person's cultivation level had clearly reached the middle realm. The examiner suppressed his dermic powers to the 4th realm and said, "Choose a weapon." Li Mu said, "I'm used to using my fists." The examiner did not waste any more words. he said calmly, "then let's begin." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Mu's figure disappeared. Bang! He punched out and the two fists collided. Both of them took a few steps back. The examiner's expression changed. He had thought that Li Mu, as a favored official of His Majesty, whose cultivation level had been forcefully raised by His Majesty, was just for show. However, this punch made him realize that the dermic powers in his body were solid and deep. In other words, he truly had the strength of the fourth realm. The examiner laughed loudly. "Finally, I've met an interesting one." With that, he took the initiative to attack Li Mu. Seeing that the examiner had no intention of using his divine powers, Li Mu was too lazy to use them. He fought bare-handed with the examiner. This person was indeed experienced in battle, but Li Mu's fighting formula was not to be trifled with. The examiner used his consciousness and experience to fight, while Li Mu used Daoist techniques to drive his body's instincts. Bang, bang, bang. Dust flew up from the drill ground. Neither of them used any divine powers. They fought purely with their physical bodies. The more the examiner fought with Li Mu, the more shocked he became. From the beginning, he had been searching for Li Mu's weakness, but until now, he had not been able to find it. Li Mu's battle experience was not at all inferior to his. In fact, he was even more experienced than him. As long as he revealed the slightest weakness, he would pursue and attack relentlessly. Gradually, as an examiner, he was actually at a disadvantage. The examiner was shocked. The surrounding examinees all stared with their eyes wide open. Especially the examiner who had just been completely defeated by the examiner. He knew very well how terrifying the examiner was. However, such a terrifying existence was actually being suppressed by someone and could only passively defend. At the side of the field, another examiner watched for a while. He laughed loudly and said, "Examiner, let me help you." With that, he flew into the fray. Fighting 1 against 2, one of them was already in the divine powers realm, while the other had suppressed his strength to the divine powers realm. The pressure should have increased greatly. However, to Li Mu, there was not much of a difference. Under the effects of Dao techniques, his body was completely relying on instinct. With one more person, the only difference was that the speed at which his mana was depleted would be faster. Seeing that the two examiners had attacked at the same time and could only barely salvage the situation, not only were the surrounding examinees shocked, even the examiners from the other two groups not far away had gathered around. Who is this person? How can he be so fierce? Fighting 1 against 2, and still have the upper hand, there are no flaws in his body. He must have extremely rich battle experience. The fierce generals in the army are only SOSO. If he was at the border, he would definitely be a fierce general. On the drill ground, besides the officials from the Ministry of War, officials from the Ministry of Rights, Ministry of Appointments, Imperial Clan Court, and the Hall of Governmental Affairs were also swiftly supervising. The commotion here very quickly attracted the attention of the officials. When Lu Yi walked over and saw that Li Mu was suppressing the two officials from the Ministry of War, he almost thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. In his heart, Li Mu had always been a civil official. He was skilled in mathematics and was proficient in criminal law. The path of policy and inquiry was his forte. He had taken most of the credit for the establishment of the imperial examination system. In the Hall of Governmental Affairs, he had chatted and laughed with his subordinates. He had looked extremely refined. Looking at this moment, the two officials from the Ministry of War, fierce generals who had killed countless enemies on the battlefield, were actually unable to retaliate in the slightest under his hands. One could not help but wonder who was the examiner in this competition. In a place further away, an official from the Ministry of War glanced over and said to another examiner beside him, "If this continues, how long will the examination take? Why don't we also learn from them and test two people at once?" The other official nodded. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly paused and said in shock, "That's not right." The two people being suppressed and beaten seemed to be Director Qin and Minister Counselor Ma. Chapter 308. The two officials from the Ministry of War stared blankly in that direction, suspecting that they were hallucinating. The Ministry of War was different from the other 5 ministries. The officials from the Ministry of Revenue, Ministry of Rights, and other ministries did not have any requirements for cultivation. But the officials of the Ministry of War, from the manager to the assistant minister and minister, were all famous generals who had fought their way out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Their cultivation was not necessarily very high, but their battle experience was not lacking. On the battlefield, Fulu would be used up and Dharma treasures would be destroyed. The only thing that could be relied on was one's own body. These generals who had retired from the battlefield all had rich experience in close combat. In a true battle of life and death, they could crush those of the same level. But now, 2 examiners from the Ministry of War were actually at a disadvantage against one examinee. With their eyesight, they could naturally see that other than suppressing their cultivation to the early 4th level, Director Chen and Minister Counselor Ma did not hold back in any other aspects. Dao techniques consumed less dermic powers than abhijnas. However, it was not beneficial for Li Mu to maintain it for a long time. Although these 2 officials from the Ministry of War had suppressed their cultivation, their mana was much thicker than Li Mu's. Li Mu did not want to continue. He slapped one of the examiners on the chest and kicked the other examiner in the waist. The 2 of them retreated a few steps before stabilizing themselves. The 2 of them were about to advance again when Li Mu stopped. He looked at them and asked, "Is it done?" The 2 of them paused and looked at each other. They smiled bitterly and said, "It's done." After the short battle just now, the 2 of them were very clear that if they only suppressed their cultivation to the same level as Li Mu, they would not be his match even if they worked together. From the last blow that he forced the 2 of them back, he probably still held back in the battle just now. The director from the Ministry of War looked at the official at the side of the field and said, "Li Mu, results of the combat examination, A+. A+ was the highest result in the combat examination, and also the highest evaluation they gave Li Mu. Under the influence of the 1,000 Illusions Venerable Master, Li Mu pursued the principle of keeping a low profile when it came to his own strength. In the past few months, he had almost never revealed his strength. But this time was different. It was not that he had to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat in the martial trial, but because he was participating in the imperial examination this time, not only for himself, but also for the Empress. Only if his performance was eye-catching enough, the officials in the court, including the people of the world, would not think that the Empress favored a mediocre person who had no good points other than being handsome. He wanted to prove to the court officials and the world that the Empress was not obsessed with his looks. After a short interlude, the combat test continued. After seeing how the 2 examiners had been defeated by Li Mu, the remaining examinees felt less fearful of them. Perhaps it was just that those people before Li Mu were too weak. Although they were not as good as Li Mu, they would not be ravaged too badly. Then, they experienced the cruelty of reality. Perhaps it was because the 2 examiners were depressed after losing to the examinees, but they did not show any mercy to the following examinees. Even if they suppressed their cultivation to the same level as the examinees, not a single examinee could last more than 10 moves from them. In a group of 100 examinees, there was only 1 A+, a dozen B+, and the rest were C+ and D grades. The examination of the other 9 groups also ended very quickly. Among the 1,000 examinees, including Li Mu, 12 examinees obtained A+ results. Among these 12 examinees, 6 A+, 2 A+, and 4 A+. The other 3 examinees who obtained A+ also defeated the examiners in their group. This made Li Mu pay more attention to the other 3 examinees. Those who could defeat the examiners of the Ministry of War with their own strength without using Fulu or Dharma treasures were not to be trifled with. They were all at the 4th realm, and if they were not restrained, their true strength would be above the 4th realm. However, Li Mu did not recognize these 3 examinees. He walked to Lu Yi and asked, "Lord Lu, do you know the identities of these 3 examinees?" Lu Yi looked in the direction Li Mu was pointing and said, "The 2 young men are called Zhou Zheng and Zhou Feng. They are the sons of the Minister of War, and the last one is the Crown Prince of the South." Zhou Zheng, Zhou Feng, Li Mu couldn't help but look at the two young men a few more times. They were the sons of the minister and the younger brother of the empress. If the Zhou family could continue to be part of the royal family of the Great Zhou dynasty, one of them would be the future emperor of the Great Zhou dynasty. Similarly, if the Xiao family regained power, the crown prince of the south would be one of the successors to the throne. Although the former emperor had many concubines, he only had one son with the empress and one daughter with the imperial noble consort. They were the deceased crown prince and the current princess Yunyang. It was said that this was because something went wrong with his cultivation in his early years, and he was devoured by the world and lost his fertility. Even in this world, infertility was a problem for many people. As such, according to the rules of the past, if the emperor did not have a son, he would have to choose one from the next generation of the imperial family. In principle, all the crown princes had a chance. In short, these three were the true sons of the great Zhou's top nobles. They were the true crown princes, and were not on the same level as the foppish sons Li Mu had met before. Li Mu looked at the three and could not help but sigh. So that's how it is. No wonder their strength is so abnormal. Lu Yi glanced at him, but did not dare to say anything. Zhou Zheng, Zhou Feng, and the crown prince of the south were powerful, but they had only defeated one examiner, and it was a narrow victory. Compared to them, the person who had single-handedly suppressed the two examiners and beaten them up was more deserving of this title. Not only that, but the Zhou brothers and the crown prince of Prince Nan were already nearing their 30s. On the other hand, Li Mu was probably not even 20 yet. Not only was he good-looking, he was also well-versed in both the pen and the sword. Even the brightest pearls of the Zhou family and the Xiao family paled in comparison to him. If Li Mu were a son of the Xiao clan or the Zhou clan, he would definitely bring unparalleled pressure to the other clan. The martial trial was a supplement to the written trial. It was graded according to B, C, and for the imperial court's reference. It would not give a specific ranking to everyone, but it would determine the top 3 A's. This was the ranking for Li Mu, the Zhou brothers, and the crown prince of the south. After a discussion, the officials of the Ministry of War listed the rankings. Li Mu was first in this martial trial, Zhou Zheng was second, then the crown prince of the south, and Zhou Feng was last. Zhou Feng was not satisfied with this result. He frowned and asked, "The 4 of us are all ace, so why is this person first?" Although Zhou Zheng and the crown prince of the south did not speak, they clearly had the same idea as Zhou Feng. The Minister of War said, "Li Mu's martial attainment far surpasses that of the other candidates. The 3 of you are ace because you have the strength of ace. He is ace because the highest result in the martial trial is ace." Zhou Feng shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that your words will not convince the public." The Minister of War thought for a moment and said, "If you are not convinced, you can try." Zhou Feng waved his hand, and a wooden sword flew into his hand. He pointed the wooden sword at Li Mu and said, "Choose a weapon. Let me see the strength of your first place in the martial trial." Li Mu said, "I don't use a weapon." Zhou Feng glanced at him and said, "I won't hold back just because you don't use a weapon." As soon as he finished speaking, his body turned into an afterimage. The wooden sword cut through the air, making a sound like tearing silk as it headed straight for Li Mu. Li Mu leaned to the side and stretched out his hand. He used 2 fingers of his right hand to pinch the blade of his sword. His left hand formed a sword finger and pointed at his throat. Although it was only a finger, if he circulated his mana or used a sword technique, these 2 fingers could easily pierce through his throat. Of course, Zhou Feng must have some life-saving means on him. However, this was the martial trial. It was a test of martial arts. One could only rely on one's own strength and not external objects. Zhou Feng's challenge to Li Mu was defeated in 1 move. The Minister of War looked at Zhou Feng and asked, "Are you convinced?" Zhou Feng put down his sword and said, "I'm convinced." The Minister of War looked at Zhou Zheng and the Crown Prince of the South and asked, "What about the 2 of you?" Zhou Zheng said, "First place in the martial trial. He deserves it." The Crown Prince of the South shook his head and said, "In terms of martial arts, I'm not his match." The Minister of War added, If the crown prince is dissatisfied with your ranking, you can also challenge young master Zhou Zheng. The crown prince of the south said, "There's no need. I'm not his match either." In this way, no one objected to the ranking of the four people. In this imperial examination, the results of the academic trial had not been released. The first place in the martial trial had already been announced. The crown prince of the south looked at Li Mu's back and said, "I lost to him in the martial trial. I can only wait for the academic trial to regain my face." As a descendant of the Shao royal family, he had countless resources piled up since he was young. The teacher who taught him martial arts was also a famous general who had been through hundreds of battles. For him to lose to such an unknown person in the martial arts examination was indeed a loss of face. The academic trial was different from the martial trial. As a descendant of the royal family, and a descendant of the royal family who was being nurtured as the future emperor, his strength was in politics. He was also proficient in mathematics and criminal law. Other than the Zhou brothers, he could ignore anyone else. Lu Yi, who was passing by, heard his words and shook her head slightly. They still had hope of defeating Li Mu in the martial trial. However, they had no chance in the academic trial. This imperial examination was actually unfair to them. They thought that Li Mu was an examinee like them, but in fact, they were examinees and Li Mu was the examiner. Reality was often so cruel. Chapter 309. The combat examination had ended, and so had the first imperial examination of the imperial court. What the examinees needed to do next was to wait for the results of the written examination. Li Mu was about to leave the drill ground when a voice came from behind him. "Martial scholar, please wait." Li Mu turned around and followed the source of the voice. He saw a figure walking towards him. That person had a tall stature and a square face. As he slowly walked over, an extremely strong oppressive feeling also came rushing over. All the examinees knew this person. He was the chief examiner of this examination, the assistant minister of the Ministry of War, and also a cultivator of the Sixth Realm. Li Mu clasped his fists and asked, "Is there anything else, Lord Assistant Minister?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of War smiled and said, "I have left the army for many years. It has been many years since I've seen such an exciting battle of the martial way. I'm excited by the prospect and can't help but want to spar with the martial scholar." Li Mu looked at him in shock. No matter how confident he was in himself, he was not arrogant enough to challenge the Dongxian. As if reading his thoughts, the assistant minister of the Ministry of War added, "Rest assured, martial scholar. We will not use spells or supernatural powers. We will only spar with martial arts. We will not go overboard." Since it was like this, Li Mu couldn't refuse anymore. He nodded and pointed at the drill ground beside him. "Please." On the drill ground, the examinees were about to leave when they suddenly stopped. On the drill ground, two figures were engaged in close combat. It was difficult to tell who had the upper hand. At first, the official of the Ministry of War thought that someone was fighting on the drill ground. When he got closer, he realized that it was the assistant minister and the martial scholar, Li Mu. Soon after, many people's faces were filled with extreme shock. Who was the assistant minister? Before he became the assistant minister of the Ministry of War, he was a famous general in the Great Zhou. He had killed countless cultivators of the Yao Kingdom on the battlefield. In terms of martial arts, there were not many people in the Great Zhou who could beat him. A young man who was not even 20 years old was actually on par with him in martial arts. One had to know that martial arts and spells were different. As long as one had enough mana, they could learn spells and spells. However, without experiencing life and death battles, without a lot of battle experience, it was very difficult to make any progress in martial arts. He was so young, but his attainments in martial arts were so profound. It was simply inconceivable. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. The Zhou brothers and Prince Nan's crown prince watched from afar with fear on their faces. They had stayed in the academy for 2 years and had heard of Li Mu's name, especially the Zhou brothers. Because of Zhou Chu's death, Li Mu and the Zhou family had an irreconcilable blood feud. However, this did not mean that they would take Li Mu seriously. Everything that he had done was merely because he had the support of the Empress. If it had been anyone else, the result would have been the same. However, today's combat examination had greatly shocked them. They had been trained as the Crown Prince. A qualified Crown Prince had to be able to rule the country and maintain order in martial arts. In terms of cultivation, they were confident that they could compete with any genius in the world, including the core disciples of the 4 sects and 6 schools. Only this Li Mu had shattered their confidence. Zhou Feng took a deep breath and said, "Martial arts cannot represent all one's strength. When cultivators fight, fulu and magic weapons are the key to victory." Although this was somewhat self-comforting, it was also the truth. A low-level cultivator using a high-level fulu to instantly kill a mid-level cultivator was not uncommon in the cultivation world. In most cases, when cultivators fought, it was still based on who had more fulu, better pills, and stronger magic weapons. Other than on the battlefield, martial arts did not have much use. Such a person could be a good general, but no matter how powerful a general was, he was still just a subject. After being shocked, Zhou Feng breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Li Mu's surname was Li, and not Xiao. Otherwise, many people in the Zhou clan would not be able to sleep because of him. The Crown Prince of the South also breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Li Mu was not a member of the Zhou clan. Otherwise, he would have become the greatest obstacle to the Xiao clan regaining the throne. On the drill ground, Li Mu and the assistant minister of the Ministry of War had been in a stalemate for 15 minutes. In the past quarter of an hour, Li Mu finally realized what a real powerhouse was. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War was extremely experienced in battle. After 100 moves, Li Mu still had not found a flaw. This kind of person's comprehension of martial arts had probably reached an extremely profound level. Across from Li Mu, the assistant minister of the Ministry of War's gaze grew more and more shocked. Li Mu had not found a flaw, and he had also not found a flaw in Li Mu's. His martial arts experience had been honed through countless life and death situations and thousands of battles. No matter how talented a young man was, it was impossible for him to achieve this. The only possibility was that he had completely inherited the martial arts attainments of a martial arts expert. In the martial examination, other than fulu and magic treasures, Daoist techniques and abhijna were all allowed. Even if he had completely inherited the martial arts attainments of a martial arts expert, it was still within the limits of the martial examination. After a few more moves, more and more people had gathered. Li Mu could not defeat the assistant minister of the Ministry of War, but the assistant minister of the Ministry of War also could not defeat him. He took the initiative to retreat and said, "Why don't we call it a day?" The left assistant minister of the Ministry of War nodded and then asked, "The martial arts scholar's attainments in martial arts are no weaker than a fierce general who has been through hundreds of battles. It is truly rare among the younger generation. Who is his master?" Li Mu replied, "My master's Daoist name is Laozi." The assistant minister of the Ministry of War thought for a while and shook his head. "I am ignorant and have never heard of him." Li Mu smiled and said, "Master is like a wild crane in the clouds, pursuing the supreme Tao wholeheartedly. Not many people in the world know his name." The assistant minister of the Ministry of War did not pursue this question and said, "What plans does the martial arts scholar have after the examination?" Li Mu said, "I don't have any plans for now. I will follow your Majesty's arrangements." The assistant minister of the Ministry of War sized him up and said, "I can see that the psyche power in the martial arts scholar is not inferior to that of an old official who has been in the court for decades. With such attainments in martial arts, if he were to become a general, he would definitely be a valiant general." After all this time, it turned out that the assistant minister of the Ministry of War wanted to poach the Empress. Li Mu could not refuse directly and said politely, "Let's talk about it in the future." The assistant minister of the Ministry of War did not force him. He glanced at him and asked, "The psyche power in the martial arts scholar is dense but very messy. Do you not know how to control psyche?" Li Mu froze and asked, What's psyche control? The assistant minister of the Ministry of War saw that he really did not know, but he did not directly explain. He said, "You will know when you experience it for yourself." As he spoke, Li Mu suddenly sensed an invisible aura emanating from the assistant minister of the Ministry of War. Under this aura, Li Mu couldn't help but take several steps back, shock on his face. Just now, the assistant minister of the Ministry of War had erupted with a powerful psyche power that made Li Mu think of Vice Principal Huang. That day in the Crepe Myrtle Palace, he had used this move to almost heavily injure Li Mu. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War explained, "This is the psyche power that this official obtained from countless soldiers. Psyche power is a mysterious power. Its use is not only to accelerate the absorption of spiritual energy, but also to condense psyche into energy and form an attack." Li Mu clasped his fist and said, "Assistant Minister, please enlighten me." It had been a long time since he had experienced such a satisfying battle of the martial way. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War admired Li Mu. This psyche control technique was not a secret. His lips moved slightly as he whispered a few words to Li Mu. Psyche power cultivation was an unorthodox method. Li Mu knew how to use psyche power to speed up cultivation, but he had never heard of using psyche power to attack. Psyche control was actually a kind of magical power. After hearing the assistant minister's message, Li Mu formed a seal with both hands and channeled his mana. With himself as the center, he released his psyche power. Around the drill ground, the onlookers all felt a kind of pressure pressing against their faces. A few officials from the Ministry of War were fine. Their bodies only trembled a little before they stabilized themselves. Most of the examinees around them took several steps back. A few of the weaker ones even fainted. The examinees looked at Li Mu with shock and fear in their eyes. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War sent some spiritual energy to the unconscious examinees and woke them up. Then he said to Li Mu, "This is your first time using psyche control. You can't control it yet. With more practice, you will be able to control it freely in a few months." Li Mu had already experienced this wonderful use of psyche power. He clasped his fist and said to the assistant minister of the Ministry of War, "Thank you, assistant minister." The assistant minister of the Ministry of War waved his hand and said to the crowd, "The martial arts examination has ended. You can all leave now." In 3 days, outside the examination hall, the results of the written examination will be announced. This time, the written examination took 2 days, but the combat examination only took half a day. Unlike the written examination, the results of the combat examination were announced on the same day. The first imperial examination of the imperial court was already the center of attention. After the combat examination ended, the news quickly spread throughout the fairy's capital. Before the combat examination, people had already guessed who would be the top scorer of the combat examination. The brothers Zhou Jing and Zhou Feng were the sons of the Minister of War. They were also the most outstanding students of the Qingyun Academy. They were the sons of the South Prince. They were skilled in both civil and martial arts and were also outstanding talents of the younger generation. The Zhou family and the Shao royal family had poured too many resources into them. Since a few years ago, they had been groomed as the crown prince of the Great Zhou. The top scorer of both the civil and martial examinations would most likely be one of them. No one had expected that the top scorer of the martial examination would be Li Mu. Li Mu was naturally well known in the fairy's capital. However, the reason why he was famous was because he punished young ruffians and forced the imperial court to abolish unfair laws. It was also because he spoke so bluntly that the court officials could not raise their heads. It was also because he stood up for the people and was not afraid of the nobles and the academy. He had completely changed the unrighteous trend in the fairy's capital. He was famous for his courage, his passion, his righteousness, and his good looks. After the combat examination, Li Mu used facts to show them that he was not only capable of these things. The Li residence. When Li Mu walked into the house, Xiaobai ran over excitedly and said, "Sister Zhou, let us see everything just now." "Benefactor is so powerful." Li Mu looked around and asked, "Is your sister Zhou home too?" Zhou Yi walked out of the kitchen with a bowl of noodles and said, "This is my reward for you." If Li Mu hadn't coincidentally captured that tree demon, there was no telling how long he would have been able to hide. In the past, in Li Mu's heart, powerhouses of the upper realm were no different from gods. Now, it seemed that they were also humans, just stronger than ordinary people. They also had 7 emotions and 6 desires, people who could see and touch them. When he personally took the bowl of noodles from the Empress, Li Mu accidentally touched her hand. The Empress' hand was delicate, smooth, and warm. As Li Mu was thinking, he realized that he was distracted and immediately threw some inappropriate thoughts to the back of his mind. Of course, it would be good to be the top scorer in the written examination. Being the top scorer in both civil and martial arts would make the Empress proud. It didn't matter if he didn't get it. No matter what, passing the imperial examination was not a problem. At this time, in the examination hall. After the imperial examination ended, the examination hall was covered by a huge formation. This formation completely isolated the examination hall from the outside world. People outside couldn't enter, and people inside couldn't come out. This formation would only be activated 3 days later when the examination hall announced the results. In these 3 days, many officials from the 3 provinces and 6 ministries were temporarily transferred. They had to finish marking all the examination papers and rank the examinees' results within 3 days. The examiners who were transferred were at least in the 4th realm. Even if they didn't sleep or rest for 3 days, it was nothing to them. In order to ensure the fairness of the imperial examination, the imperial court arranged for people to transcribe the examination papers as soon as the end of the written examination. The transcribed examination papers only had numbers and no names. Among the 3 examination papers, the mathematics paper was the simplest. They just had to follow the standard answers and check them one by one. The criminal law paper was second. Except for the Ministry of Justice and a few other special offices, there were very few officials in the Great Zhou who were proficient in criminal law. The second examination paper was mostly marked by the officials of the Ministry of Justice. The most difficult one was the policy question. There were no fixed answers to any of the questions in the policy section. The officials who reviewed the exam papers had to carefully review each examinee's exam paper. In order to finish reviewing the exam within 3 days, the officials of the Hall of Governmental Affairs came out in full force this time. 2 days later, under the review of dozens of officials without sleep and rest, all the examination papers were marked. The next thing to do was to summarize the results of the 3 examinations and rank the examinees according to their scores. The format of the written examination's results was different from the martial examination. It didn't use the A, B, C, or D grading method. For the 3 examination papers, full marks for each subject were 100 points. The results of the 3 subjects were summed up, and it was clear at a glance who was higher and who was lower. In addition, if any of the 3 subjects scored less than 60 points, no matter how high the other 2 subjects' scores were, they would be eliminated directly. After another half a day, all the examination papers were summarized. According to their scores, only 100 examinees would be selected out of the thousands of examinees in this imperial examination. These 100 examinees had already appeared, but they only had numbers and no names. The last step was to match their numbers with their names. Of course, everyone was most concerned about the top scorer of the written examination this time. After the results of the 3 subjects were summarized, many people gathered around. Then the crowd cried out in surprise. Who is this person with the number 9527? He actually scored full marks for mathematics, criminal law, and policy questions. Not only mathematics, but there are many people who scored full marks for this subject. He actually scored full marks for criminal law and policy questions at the same time. Only one person scored full marks for those 2 subjects. Is it Zhou Zheng, Zhou Feng, or Prince Nan's son? Outside the crowd, a few officials from the secretariat stood there. Lu Yi sighed. I didn't expect Lord Li to score full marks for criminal law as well. The 6 imperial secretaries of the Hall of Governmental Affairs had studied the exam paper that scored full marks on policy together. There was no other person in the entire imperial court who could answer so many questions about politics so perfectly, to the point that they felt that they were inferior to him. Without a doubt, 95-27 was Li Mu. He scored full marks for policy questions and mathematics. As expected, the officials from the Ministry of Justice had said that the examination paper from Assistant Minister Zhou was not simple. If they were to do this examination paper, they would not be able to get full marks. Full marks for criminal law not only required a thorough understanding of the laws of the Great Zhou, but also a thorough understanding of the laws. Zhou Xiong said, if that's the case, wouldn't he be the top scholar in both civil and martial subjects? Wang Shi shook his head and said, there's nothing strange about this. No one knows his ability better than us. If he were to participate in the imperial examination with these examinees, there would only be one outcome. Zhang Huaili said, he is indeed a talent that His Majesty has set his eyes on. The top scholar in both civil and martial subjects, his future is limitless. At this moment, an official had already brought over a thick booklet. The imperial examination selection is based on him. He has contributed so much to the imperial court, but he still has to participate in the imperial examination. If this is not fairness, then what is? Everyone fell silent when they heard this. Their doubts came from their previous understanding of Li Mu. In everyone's understanding, he was bold, fearless, and cunning. This was the part of him that everyone had the deepest impression of. Without this imperial examination, they would not have known that Li Mu, in addition to these, was also proficient in both the pen and the sword. After accepting this reality, everyone's attention was gradually placed on the subsequent rankings of the written examination. 95-28, who is 95-28? Zhou Zheng, Zhou Feng, or the Crown Prince of the Southern Prince. 95-28 was right under Li Mu's name. Everyone looked down and their expressions froze. After a long time, someone said in shock, who is this Li Si? What can Constable Li not do? I can't call him Constable Li anymore. I have to call him the top scholar. Sigh, I regret it. Constable Li is still unmarried. This time, many people will want to marry their daughters to him. I'm afraid there's no hope for the 2 beautiful girls in my family. In the divine capital, Li Mu was the protector of the people. Countless people were sincerely happy for him. In front of the examination hall, the Zhou brothers and Prince Nan's crown prince looked at the 2 shining golden words in the sky. They felt that they were abnormally dazzling. It was one thing to be the top scholar of martial arts, but even the title of top scholar of literature had been snatched by Li Mu. This made the 3 of them lose all face. They had received the best education since they were young and enjoyed the best resources. In terms of writing and martial arts, they did not lose to any of their peers or even their elders. However, they had lost to a junior who they did not even know a few months ago. This was a reality that the 3 of them found hard to accept. However, at this point, they had to accept it even if they did not want to. Fortunately, Li Mu's name was known throughout the divine capital. He was also the Empress' favorite subject. If he was mediocre, wouldn't it mean that the Empress did not have a good eye for talent? Li Mu's reputation had already spread far and wide. It was still acceptable to lose to him. However, if they lost to some unknown person, it would be truly humiliating. There was no need to ask for the top scholar of literature. They just wanted to see who got the second place. The 3 of them looked to the left. To the left of the top scholar was the name of the second place. In the next moment, extreme shock appeared on the faces of the 3 people at the same time. It really was Li Si. The 3 of them were dumbfounded when they saw the second shining name on the azure sky roll. It was fine if it was Li Mu, but where did this Li Si come from? Like the Zhou brothers and Prince Nan's crown prince, The other candidates in front of the examination hall and the people of the divine capital were also puzzled. Compared to the top scholar of the theory examination, the name of the second place was too unfamiliar and too ordinary. Li Si was a name that people would believe even if they said that he was a dog on the streets of the divine capital. However, as the second place in the theory examination, they felt that it was lacking in style. More importantly, no one had ever heard of his name before, whether it was the people present or the people of the divine capital. After Li Si, there was no suspense in the rankings. Third place in the theory examination, Zhou clan's Zhou Zheng. Fourth place in the theory examination, Prince Nan's Crown Prince Xiao Yu. Fifth place in the theory examination, Zhou clan's Zhou Feng. To others, this was a good result that could bring glory to their ancestors. The results of the first imperial examination held by the court were announced today. Until night, the 100 golden names were still shining in the night sky. The name of the top scholar, Li Mu, was the biggest and the brightest. As the top scholar in both civil and military affairs, he was naturally the topic of the people's discussion the most. He beat up playboys and punished young villains. He dared to question the officials of the Ministry of Justice, and also dared to scold all the officials in the court. Those who didn't like him talked about him behind his back. They said that other than his good looks, he had no other abilities. They said that he only relied on the support of the Empress. Without the Empress, he was nothing. They said that everything he had today was obtained by flattering the Empress. In this imperial examination, he once again proved himself to the people of the world. He suppressed the students of the 4 great academies, suppressed the talents of the 36 counties, and became the top scholar in both civil and military affairs. He completely shut the mouths of those people. He let the people of the world see clearly why the Empress only favored him out of all the officials in the court. He could bring peace to the world with his pen and settle the world with his military affairs. This was a true talent. He was worthy of the Empress's special favor. The students of the academies and the future crown prince could only serve as a foil in front of him. Of course, Li Mu becoming the top scholar in both civil and military affairs also proved one thing. The Empress had a unique insight. She had discovered Li Mu's talent from the very beginning. It wasn't as the rumors said, that she was only interested in Li Mu's manliness. After the results of the imperial examination were announced, both the officials and the people couldn't help but praise the Empress in their hearts. Chapter 3:13. 3 days after the results were announced, all the grand scholars who passed the examination had to face the Empress in the Golden Palace. This was an important ceremony. The purpose of this ceremony was to give them a special honor. For most of them, this might be their only chance to stand here in their lives. On the other hand, the Empress wanted to personally check if there were any spies from other countries or the demon sect among them. For officials of the 5th level and above, like Cui Ming, if they wanted to hide something, the Empress might not be able to find out. But among these grand scholars, the strongest was only at the 4th level. Before the examination, they had already been tested. Finally, the Empress tested them again. It was almost guaranteed that nothing would go wrong, unless they had a special chant or spell similar to the Clear Heart mantra. After the list of candidates who passed the examination was released, Li Mu looked at it carefully. The students of the White Deer Institute did not participate in the examination, but among the 100 candidates, there were still more than 70. Almost 80% of the grand scholars came from the 3 great institutes. The Empress's purpose of reforming the examination was to break the monopoly of the institutes over the officials in the imperial court. This result seemed to be a failure of Li Mu and her. But compared to the past, it was already a great improvement. Before this, the number was 10%. Now, the monopoly of the institutes had been broken, giving the local talents room to advance. Even if this promotion was very difficult, the imperial examinations were like an army of thousands of men and horses crossing a single wooden bridge. There might be some problems within the three great academies, but the students they taught were indeed the top talents of the great Zhou dynasty. They had to go through years of bitter study and cultivation in the academies, so there was no reason for them to lose to others. Although the results of the examination did not make much of a difference to the institutes, the influence of the examination on the institutes was far-reaching. From now on, the students of the institutes would no longer have an iron rice bowl. If they wanted to enter the imperial court as an official, they would have to compete with countless talents in the Great Zhou. Because there was no pressure within the institutes, some of the unhealthy practices would gradually be alleviated. After the examination, the candidates who failed would gradually leave the divine capital. These 100 grand scholars would also be given official positions by the imperial court. According to the rankings, the top scholar of the written examination would be given a 5th rank official position. It was rare to see someone who had no official position directly get a 5th rank official position in the history of the imperial court. One had to know that Zhang Chun had toiled for more than 10 years and was only a rank 5. From this, it could be seen that the imperial court attached great importance to the imperial examination. If one could stand out among the talents of the 36 counties and the students of the academy, it could be said that he had a meteoric rise. Those who placed 2nd and 3rd in the written examination would be granted official positions of grade 6. The officials after that were rank 6 and below. Those with good grades could stay in Fairy's capital and be assigned to the 6 ministries or the 9 temples for a year of probation. Those with bad grades would have to go to other places and assume positions such as county deputy or county lieutenant, assisting the county magistrate in governing the local area. They also needed to be probationary for a year. After a year, if they passed the assessment, they could be promoted to official positions. Ever since Cui Ming's official position was abolished, the position of assistant minister of the secretariat was vacant. Lu Yi took his position and became the new assistant minister of the secretariat. As a result, only 5 of the 6 palace secretaries were left. Although the position of the secretary of the secretariat was not high, he had great power. He was in charge of the important affairs of the country. The vacancy of the secretary of the secretariat naturally caused the competition of various forces. Both the new and old parties wanted this position. However, an imperial edict personally written by the empress made them give up on this idea. The new top scholar, Li Mu, would be appointed as the secretary of the secretariat. Before the imperial examination, no matter how much the empress favored Li Mu, letting him take on such an important position would have attracted the opposition of all the court officials. Firstly, Li Mu was not from the 4 great academies. Other than being a low-level imperial censor, he could only be an official and not an official. Secondly, the position of secretary of the secretariat was not something that anyone could take on. One had to have enough talent, keen insight, and the ability to make decisions on important matters of the country. However, after the imperial examination, Li Mu's status as the top scholar in 2 subjects had shut everyone's mouth. In terms of qualifications, he was the top scholar in both civil and military affairs. Whether it was the imperial court or the military, he could go to either. In terms of ability, he scored full marks in all 3 subjects. Questions on policy were his forte. If he did not have the qualifications to be the secretary of the secretariat, no one else could. The empress let Li Mu take part in the imperial examination to give him the qualifications to shut the mouths of the people. Li Mu did not disappoint the empress. He took down 2 top scholars in one go. Those who wanted to oppose the empress had nothing to say. The empress had said before that he would be appointed as the secretary of the secretariat. Li Mu was not surprised by this result. After asking for Li Si's opinion, Li Mu asked the empress to arrange the position of the minister of God's capital for him. The 3 provinces and 6 ministries were filled with intrigue. It was not suitable for Li Si. Old Zhang had to manage the God's capital office and the imperial clan temple. He could not be at 2 places at once. The positions of Minister of God's Capital and Commandant of God's Capital happened to be vacant. He could share a lot of the burden with old Zhang. Li Mu did not say anything else. He had no say in these matters. If he said too much, he would be suspected of being a favored official interfering in politics. After becoming the secretary of the Secretariat, Li Mu was no longer a constable of the God's Capital office. Deputy Constable's son got what he wanted. He finally got rid of the word deputy and successfully received 5 times the salary. Li Mu handed the constable uniform to the government office. The constables there sent Li Mu off. "Goodbye, boss. Boss, come back to the government office often. I wish you a meteoric rise in the future." The God's Capital office used to be the office with the least sense of existence in the God's Capital. As the constables of the God's Capital office, the people did not trust them. The constables of the Ministry of Justice looked down on them. Even they themselves were used to it. All this changed after Li Mu came to the God's Capital office. The God's Capital office was no longer the cowardly office it used to be. They had beaten up the rich and foppish and captured the students of the academy. The people would choose the God's Capital office as their first target. The constables of the Ministry of Justice would no longer look at them differently. Some people had been constables their whole lives before they knew what a constable should be like. Li Mu waved at Wang Wu and the others. He walked out of the God's Capital office and found that the outside was also crowded with people. "Constable Li. Constable Li, stop calling him Constable Li. Now we have to call him Lord Li or Zhuangyun." The people greeted Li Mu. The owner of the noodle stall walked up slowly and asked, "Constable Li, are you not going to work in the God's Capital office anymore?" Li Mu knew what they were worried about. He smiled and said, "Don't worry. Even if I'm not here, you can still come to the God's Capital office if you need anything. The God's Capital magistrate, Lord Zhang Chun, is a good official who loves the people like his own children. The new minister of the God's Capital, Lord Li, is my friend. He hates evil and will stand up for you. If you have any problems that the God's Capital office can't solve, you can also come to me." When the people heard this, they were obviously relieved. They had been trapped here for 3 days. Along the way, Cui Ming had almost been caught several times, but he had managed to escape. Later on, they were trapped here by Cui Ming's scheme. Someone had set up a huge formation in this valley. This formation was extremely powerful. Entering the formation was very easy, but exiting it was harder than ascending to the heavens. With the few of them working together and the Dharma treasure that His Majesty had bestowed upon her, they could even put up a fight against a powerhouse in the early stage of the 6th realm. However, they could not break this formation from the inside. Not only that, this formation also blocked her from sending messages, causing her to completely lose contact with the fairies' capital. In the past few days, Cui Ming and the person who set up the formation did not do anything to them. They only trapped them. It was likely that they wanted to wait for their magic power to be depleted so that they could get rid of them effortlessly. A middle-aged woman walked over and shook her head. "It still won't work. They probably want to trap us to death, or use us as bait to kill more powerhouses from the imperial court." The fact that Cui Ming was a spy from the demon sect had already caused the imperial court to lose a lot of face. If he set up the imperial court again and caused the imperial court to lose even more powerhouses, not only would it cause the imperial court to lose even more prestige, it would also fuel the demon sect's arrogance. Shangguanli took out a piece of spiritual jade and held it in her hand. As she recovered her magic power, she said in a low voice, "I just hope that no one else will come, outside the valley, on top of a mountain." Cui Ming stood with his hands behind his back. The man wearing a black pearl crown glanced at him and asked, "Why don't you just kill them?" Cui Ming said calmly, "It would be too much of a pity to kill them. Shangguan Li is the Empress' personal female official. Keeping her alive is more valuable than killing her. Moreover, only by keeping them alive can the imperial court send even more powerful powerhouses. When that time comes, we can take their souls and absorb their cultivation. Wouldn't the two of us be able to advance further? You people from the Meizong sect are really sinister and vicious. The man glanced at him and asked, "Aren't you afraid that you'll attract the most powerful powerhouses? When that time comes, the formation won't be able to trap them, and both of us will die." Cui Ming smiled and said, "Don't worry. I know the imperial court better than the Meizong sect. The number of powerhouses at the peak of the sixth realm in the imperial court can be counted on one hand. They can't come here. At most, they can only send the beginner sixth realm. You spent so much time to set up such a formation. It's not just to trap a few fifth realm powerhouses, right?" The black-robed man glanced at him and said, "I'll say this first. Whether it's these people or those who come later, I don't want any of their Dharma treasures. However, I want all of their soul energy." Cui Ming didn't think much and nodded. "I promise you." After the two of them reached an agreement, the black-robed man fell silent for a moment and asked again, "You've been hiding in the Great Zhou court for so long. You must know a lot of secrets. About half a year ago, Chu Jiang of Gozhouzian died. Do you know what happened?" Cui Ming shook his head and said, "This is a top secret in the imperial court. Other than the officials in the North County, I'm afraid only a few people in the imperial court know about it. But is there a problem with Chu Jiang of Gozhouzian's death?" The black-robed man said in a low voice, "His cultivation is slightly higher than mine. He hid in the North County for 5 years to use the 18 Hell formation and sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people in the county city to reach the sixth realm. Once the 18 Hell formation is set up, it can trap Dongxian to death. Only transcendence can break it. According to what I know, he clearly set up the 18 Hell formation that night, but he still failed in the end." Cui Ming looked at the valley below and asked, "How is this formation compared to the 18 Hell formation?" There was a hint of pride in the black-robed man's voice. He said slowly, "Although I don't have 18 ghost generals under my command, this valley is a wonderful place to gather in. With a little use of the surrounding terrain, I can borrow the power of heaven and earth to set up this formation. Even a sixth realm expert would find it difficult to escape. It's only stronger than the 18 Hell formation, not weaker." Cui Ming smiled and said, "Then there's no need to worry. If you can refine the souls of these people, I'm sure His Highness Emperor Song will be able to become the head of the 10 kings of hell, right?" The black-robed man didn't speak again, but he snorted coldly in his heart. His cultivation was already at the peak of the spectral soul realm. He wasn't inferior to Chu Jiang of Gozhouzian at that time. If the Great Zhou court sent another sixth realm expert, then with the help of that person's soul power and these people in the battlefield, he had a glimmer of hope to take another step forward. At that time, he wouldn't even have to bow down to the Nether Saint. When Emperor Song thought of this, he couldn't help but smile. But in the next moment, his eyes moved slightly and he said, "Hide your aura first. Someone is coming." Li Mu held Shangguan Li's life talisman in his hand as he flew all the way here. Dangers lurked everywhere in this desolate mountain forest. Even cultivators couldn't inhale too much of the poisonous fog and miasma in the forest. He didn't know how many poisonous insects and ferocious beasts he encountered along the way. She was about to die, but she was still thinking about whether others would be sad. She truly loved the Empress. If it were Li Mu, he would definitely not be able to do this. After a moment of silence, Shangguan Li took out a piece of fulu from her sleeve and handed it to Li Mu. Li Mu looked at her and asked, "What are you doing?" Shangguan Li said expressionlessly, "This is a heaven-grade fulu. It can allow you to teleport hundreds of miles away. In a while, we will do our best to break this formation. You can immediately use this talisman to escape to the county city of Yunzhong County." Li Mu asked, "If you can break the formation, why don't you use it yourselves?" Li said indifferently, if we explode our primordial spirits together, we can attack the weak points of this formation. We can break a hole in this formation. You can take the opportunity to escape. The cultivation of Taoism cultivators was based on their primordial spirits. If their physical bodies died, their primordial spirits would not be destroyed and could be reborn. If their primordial spirits exploded, their souls would truly be destroyed. Li Mu never thought that Li would give her only chance to live to him. She had always disliked him. Li Mu looked at her and asked, "Why?" Li looked into the distance and said, "Her Majesty can do without us, but she can't do without you." At this moment, Li Mu suddenly felt some admiration for Li. Although he did not like her much in the past, of course, he coveted her position more. He wanted to replace her and become the Empress' closest vassal. But now it seemed that in some matters, he would never be able to compare to Li. Not only could she give her life for the Empress, she could even give her life for her love rival, her political rival, who often competed with her for favor. It was enough to show her unadulterated loyalty to the Empress. Li finally looked at Li Mu and said, "If you can escape, I hope you can wholeheartedly assist Her Majesty in governing the Great Zhou so that Her Majesty can escape from that cage as soon as possible." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "You make it sound so serious. Isn't it just a broken formation? It's not a big deal." Chapter 316. Author's note: I didn't expect it to rain at night. I couldn't get a taxi home after dinner, and it took too long to walk back, delaying my writing. In the end, I decided to pay a higher price and hailed a Mercedes-Benz. It's so expensive. If I don't write at least one chapter, I'll feel sorry for myself. I have to write more in the future to earn more money. Before coming to Yunzhong County, Li Mu didn't think that Li and the others would be trapped by Cui Ming. With her strength, it was enough to deal with Cui Ming alone, not to mention that she had these internal guard experts by her side. He only wanted to check on her situation on the way back to the North region and then report to the Empress. He didn't expect that with so many people, they would still be defeated by Cui Ming. If they knew the result, the Imperial Court would definitely send Sixth Realm experts. Li looked at Li Mu calmly. The array he mentioned had already trapped the 5 of them for 4 whole days. If it were any other time, Li would inevitably scold Li Mu. However, at this moment, she didn't have the mood to scold Li Mu for his lack of knowledge. She said, "Attacking this array will backfire. Don't force yourself. Save your mana and try your best to escape later." Li Mu looked at her and asked, "Are you really willing to die for me?" Li said calmly, "Not for you, but for Her Majesty." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "It's the same." He patted Li's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, you won't die. I promised Her Majesty to bring you back safe and sound. If I go back alone, I won't have the face to see Her Majesty." "You're still saying this at a time like this?" Li just opened her mouth when Li Mu covered it. Li Mu raised his head to take a look and said, "I happen to know of this formation. Although this formation is powerful, it's not like there's no way to break it. Including you, there are 5 5th-level cultivators here. That's enough." Li took away Li Mu's hand and didn't care about his rude behavior just now. She quickly asked, "Is what you said true?" What Li Mu said was naturally true. The Tao of array formations came from ancient inheritances. Apart from the almighty of the spirit array sect, who could innovate from time to time, it was impossible for a kid from the demon sect to create a new array formation. There were only a few powerful formations in the demon sect: the 10 Ghosts God Trapping Formation, the 18 In Prison Formation, and the Immortal Trapping Formation here. The power of this formation was about the same as the Great Formation of the 18 Hells. However, the person who set up this Immortal Trapping Formation knew how to make use of the surrounding terrain to borrow a portion of the power of heaven and earth. This made the power of this formation even more powerful than the Great Formation of the 18 Hells set up by Chu Jiang of Gojoseon.